The story begins with the fact that it was already late at night in the city of Yuanhai, so in the entire skyscraper the light was on only in a few windows. In one of the apartments, the door to the bedroom is slightly open, from which a woman's voice can be heard. There were women's shoes scattered on the living room floor, as well as leopard print underwear. The girl stood next to the door through which a path of scattered clothes led. She watched with horror and tears in her eyes what was happening in the room. The girl asks Wen Sheng when he will tell Lu Yiye what is happening behind her back. The blonde recognizes the girl as Ling Shui, while the guy replies that Li Yiye owns half of the company's shares. Ling Shui is not satisfied with this answer. She believes that she can easily buy all the girl's shares. Ling Shui was Lu Yiye's paternal half-sister, and 5 years ago they starred in a big palace drama together. Ling Shui asks if the guy still loved the girl even though he put her in bed with someone else 5 years ago. The girl also reminds that Wen Sheng also took Lu Yiye's child. Lu Yiye remembers how Wen Sheng proposed having a child on their wedding night 5 years ago. He said that this was so that grandfather would not have any complaints about the engagement, but it turned out that this was all a joke and part of the plan. Wen Sheng told Ling Shui that he did all this so that she could claim the grand prize tomorrow. Lu Yiye was flying to America to help Ling Shui open her international career and was scheduled to return tomorrow. She wanted to support her, but now she was with her husband and was telling her how stupid Lu Yi was that she didn't even know about the inheritance. Jiang Wen Sheng looms over the girl and says that Lu Yi is not as stupid as she may seem. After this, Wen Sheng continues to cheat on his wife, not even realizing that Lu Yiye is watching him. The blonde began to wipe the tears from her cheeks and collected her thoughts, despite the betrayal. Lu Yiye stopped crying and her eyes were full of determination as she remembered tomorrow's top star award. She took out her phone, remembering that all the last years of Lu Ling Shui's life were for this day. Lu Yi's phone screen confirmed that the video had been saved successfully, and only after that the upset girl began to leave, leaving the cheaters alone. Lu Yi went to the hotel to wait out that night and make a plan for her further actions there. The blonde sat at her laptop in her hotel room in complete silence. A message came to her phone from Wen Sheng, in which he said that he was very tired and bored. Lu Yiye read the message. She already knew what her husband had been doing all this time and what he thought about her. But she didn't want to lose her advantage so easily, so she behaved as usual and received a declaration of love. Lu Yiye was angry at such words, and she promised that tomorrow she would definitely see how the guy would feel. A new day has arrived and the long-awaited Top Star Award ceremony has begun. Lu Lingxue appeared on the red carpet and was photographed by many people from all sides. The girls sat next to Wen Sheng and asked if she was beautiful, but all his attention was focused on the phone. The guy thought it was strange that Lu Yi had not called yet and thought that something might have happened to her. The announcement of the winner began, and Ling Shui said that now he should wait for her to return with the prize. The host suggested finding out which films were nominated, and Ling Shui's eyes filled with horror, because what appeared on the huge screen was not a film at all, but yesterday's betrayal with the participation of Ling Shui and Wen Sheng. All the spectators who were present in the hall were shocked by what they saw on the screen. The main participants in the video were no less shocked than everyone else and did not understand how this was possible. Wen Sheng was the first to recover from the shock and began shouting for the video to be turned off immediately. The guy jumped up from his seat while Lu Ling Shui couldn't believe her eyes and froze in place. People saw Wen Sheng and started taking pictures of him and shouting that the sisters had hit the jackpot with this guy. Lu Yi actually attended the award ceremony. She stood towards the end of the hall and observed the situation. She was pleased with herself and wanted the couple to thoroughly enjoy the first part of her plan. Wen Sheng tried to cover his face and made excuses that it was not him at all and they had misunderstood everything. Lu Ling Shui remained seated. She covered her face and screamed not to be filmed. But naturally the requests had no success, and the crowd continued to film and take photographs of the couple. Lu Yiye was convinced that her plan had the effect she had planned, after which the girl left the ceremony. As she walked along the corridor towards the exit of the building, her phone rang in her purse. Lu Yi took out her phone and felt a surge of contempt when she saw who she was calling from. The girl answered the phone, although she did not want to talk to Wen Sheng at all. The guy screamed in panic that something terrible had happened and asked IEG not to believe anyone but him. He was very excited and asked Lu Yi to try to avoid the reporters who were blocking all the exits. But the guy couldn't say everything he wanted, because Lu Yi hung up and didn't listen to him. Wen Sheng tried to call the girl again, but the phone was turned off, and the girl herself was crying. She threw away her phone because it was so hard for her to pretend like nothing had happened. Lu Yi went to the bar counter was quite deserted, and the bartender was minding his own business. The girl drank alcohol. This was not her first drink as Lu Yi's face was red. Sitting nearby were men discussing the recent incident involving Lu Ling Shui and Wen Sheng. Lu Yi again remembered the events of 5 years ago, that look on Wen Sheng's face when he apologized to her. She didn't want to remember it now because the events were quite painful, but she still remembered the moment when Wen Sheng told her that the child did not survive. Lu Yi threw away the memory, touching her forehead. She didn't understand why she was remembering this now, but if we assume that the child survived then, he would now be 5 years old. Suddenly there was a loud sound that scared all the visitors to the bar. This sound was very similar to an explosion. Lu Yi became alarmed, just like everyone else, when the explosion distracted her from her heavy thoughts. He started walking out of the kitchen, and people started running out after him. They shouted that a gas cylinder had exploded and there was a fire. The girl wanted to get up from her seat, but her heel caught on the leg of a bar stool. Because of this, the girl fell to the floor while everyone around was fussing and trying to leave the room. Lu Yi noticed that she was already starting to feel dizzy from the smoke and realized that she needed to leave the bar as soon as possible. She began to get up and noticed a boy who was sitting scared under the bar counter. Seeing a child in a bar was strange and the girl thought she was hallucinating. But the little boy in front of her was too real, and his eyes were full of tears. Lu Yi realized that she was not imagining things and told the boy not to be afraid, because she would save him. The girl grabbed the little boy by the hand and began to carry him out of the burning building. She was carrying him towards the emergency exit when a scream sounded behind them and someone else hurried towards the door. The man pushed the girl and the child out of his way and ran to save himself. Lu Yi could not stay on her feet and fell to the floor with the boy in her arms. Because of this fall, the girl severely injured her knee and felt that she could no longer carry the child. Therefore, she asked the boy to run further on his own and look for his parents on the street. The boy grabbed Lu Yi's dress and tearfully refused to leave the bar without her. The girl patted the boy on the head and said that he needed to run out and ask someone to help her. The boy began to run away, and the girl shouted after him that he was very brave and if he hurried, they would never meet. The smoke became thicker and Lu Yi began to cough and was unable to breathe freely. The building in which the bar was located was on fire, and the young guy asked to be released. Yuan Shao was held in place and told that it was not safe, but he screamed that Yo-Yo stayed inside. The guy screamed that he couldn't leave the boy inside as an expensive black car pulled up to the scene. Yuan Shao turned around at the sound and saw a familiar car. He was so excited that he stopped struggling. Yuan Shao and the guys who were holding him looked at the man in fear. The man was Uncle Yuan Shao, who was angrily asking where Yu was. The guys were very scared, and Yuan Shao admitted to his uncle that Yao Yao was in the bar. The man was very angry because of such carelessness towards the child, but the guy fell to his knees and began to say that it was all his fault and he shouldn't have brought the child to such a place. The man said nothing to this and simply turned away to walk towards the burning building. Yuan Shao realized what his uncle was up to and grabbed his leg. He said that he would go and save Yo-Yo himself. But the man was not going to listen and continued to walk towards the building to save the child himself. He pushed Yuan Shao away with his foot and ordered the guy to get out and get out of the way. The man began to run towards the building, taking off his jacket along the way. He was determined to save the boy. But he didn't even have time to reach the entrance to the building when he saw what struck him. The little boy walked out of the fire on his own. He was surrounded by smoke and flames could be seen behind him. The boy covered his nose and mouth with his small hand. The boy's eyes were watering, and he was coughing heavily. The man was shocked when he recognized the boy as Yo-Yo, but he was very happy to see him. The man leaned over to the boy and began to calm him down and hug him, picking him up. Yo-Yo pushed the man away from him and began to kick, which greatly surprised the man. The boy pointed towards the burning building and hoped that the man would understand him. The man carefully followed where the boy in his arms was pointing. He was very focused and trying to figure out what Yo-Yo wanted from him. Then he looked at the boy and asked if there was anyone else inside. The man began to carry the boy away from the building and said that firefighters would soon arrive and take everyone remaining. But the boy was not satisfied with this answer, and he bit the man hard on the hand. The man put the crying Yao Yao on the ground and agreed to fulfill his request. Yuan Shao walked up to them and took the boy by the shoulders. They watched as the man moved away from them. And the man continued to run towards the burning building, not paying attention to Yuan Shao's screams. And the man ran straight into the open doors towards the fire and smoke. The guys who were with Yuan Shao also watched the man's actions in complete shock. After some time, a man came out of the building, and in his arms he carried a girl. Yuan Shao was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief as his uncle walked out of the building. Everyone watched in admiration as Mr. Jan's heir saved the girl from the fire. But the most admiring of all the spectators was Yo-Yo. He was happy that the girl was saved. The next day, all those involved in the incident who were injured were taken to the hospital. Lu Yai opened her eyes and suddenly realized that she was in a hospital bed. She looked to the corner of her room and saw a man. She began to remember what happened. The man who saved Lu Yai from the fire yesterday, now he sat in her room and watched her. The girl jumped out of bed and began asking if the man had seen a boy about 5 years old in that building. The man looked at Lu Yiye and said that Yu Yiye was completely fine. Then the girl finally noticed that the boy from the bar was sleeping next to her. Lu Yi patted Yu Yu on the head and asked who the man was to this boy. The man remained completely calm and told Lu Yiye that he was the boy's father. The girl thought that Yo-Yo and the man were really very similar. At this moment, Yuan Shao appeared in the ward. He winked at the girl and asked if she was awake. Lu Yi was very surprised when she recognized the guy who came to her as Ken Yuan. It turned out that Yao Yao's brother was the eldest grandson of Mr. Ken and was the young heir to a huge business. But suddenly the girl realized that if her eyes weren't lying and she wasn't going crazy, then the man was his uncle. Lu Yai mentally panicked when she realized that the man who saved her from the fire was named Zhang Shao. Lu Yai watched the Jan family in her room and didn't know how she should react. Yuan Shao was about to leave and asked the girl not to pay attention to who his uncle was. The girl looked at the man, who was carefully watching her from his place. She said that she was very embarrassed, and she could not even think that she would see him in this city. Lu Yiye rejected Zhang Shao 5 years ago, but they had never met in person. In addition, the girl has changed a lot and changed her name. Ken Shao looked calm. And Lu Yi decided that the man still didn't recognize her and there was no need to worry too much. She exhaled in relief and felt the accumulated tension leave her body. Yuan Shao said that he should tell her that Zhang Shao carried her out of the fire, since the girl was so excited by the mere sight of him. Lu Yiye was very shocked when she heard these words from the guy. She shuddered all over. And she remembered with horror how fierce the fire was yesterday, and Zhang Shao entered the building and saved her. The girl tried to figure out how best to react to such news. But Zhang Shao got up from his chair and walked over to the bed, hovering over the girl. And Lu Yiye quickly began to thank him for saving her and awkwardly admitted that this was a very pleasant surprise. The girl was trying to be nice and smiled at Ken Shao when he suddenly asked how she was going to thank him. Lu Yai seemed to freeze when she heard the question, and she froze with a smile on her face. She began to panic and tried to quickly think of a way to thank Zhang Shao for saving her. The girl imagined herself offering money, but the man already had mountains of gold and coins. An option appeared in her head where she offered herself as a lifelong housekeeper. But she immediately dismissed this option, since a person like Zhang Shao could easily afford servants. Therefore, Lu Yi offered to give him a banner of honor as the bravest person she knows. Seeing Yuan Shao holding back his laughter, she explained that they had money and servants, and she really didn't know how to thank him. After these explanations, Ken Shao asked her to marry him as a thank you. This surprised Yuan Shao. And such a statement surprised Lu Yai even more, who silently tried to understand the meaning of the words. Yuan Shao asked if his uncle was seriously going to ask this girl to marry. But Zhang Shao looked completely serious and said that this is exactly what he meant. Yuan Shao was excited and didn't understand why his uncle was saying this, and he said that he is a real joker. But Zhang Shao closed his eyes and remained calm despite the boy's anxiety. Lu Yiye was still at a loss and thought that the man had not noticed something. And then the girl came up with a brilliant idea on how to get out of this situation without offending anyone. She reminded Mr. Jan that she forgot to tell him something and had to do it now. Lu Yi said that she saved Yu Yu's life, and the man saved her, and it turns out that they were even. But the man did not change his decision and said that Yo-Yo also saved the girl's life. Yuan Shao explained that she saved the boy, and Yu Yu called his father, thus thanking her. And Zhang Xiao brought her out of the fire and the girl owes gratitude. The man said that you could say that. Lu Yai hoped that the man was joking and said that she was just not a very famous actress and they were from different walks of life. Zhang Xiao said that it doesn't matter, and he will help her achieve heights. The girl was upset by this answer. She shouted to him that she liked girls, so they couldn't be together. But Zhang Xiao looked at her impressively and said that this sounded very unsurprising. Lu Yi closed her eyes and screamed in despair that she didn't want to be someone's stepmother. Yuan Shao looked at the girl in shock and hoped that Yu did not hear this. Fortunately, the boy continued to sleep peacefully next to the girl and was not awakened by the screams. Lu Yi looked at Zhang Xiao in fear and didn't know what came over her. A frightening aura began to emanate from the man and began to fill the room. Zhang Xiao was very gloomy, and seemed to want to say something, but changed his mind. The man stood up from his chair and began to walk closer to the frightened Lu Yi. His hand landed with a thud not far from the girl's head, and she tried to move away. But Zhang Xiao surprised everyone when the atmosphere suddenly changed, and the man told her to be a loving mother. Lu Yi felt a strong pressure and wanted to sink into the ground right there. She moved away and began to bow and asked him not to be angry, because it was a joke. The girl hugged Yo and began to say how sweet and smart he was and that it was destined to become his stepmother. Yuan Shao watched this and thought that the girl had a great future because she played well. Lu Yi placed the boy on her lap and gently stroked his back. Zhang Xiao looked away from the girl and his son to look at his watch and find out what time it was. Yuan Shao reminded him of an important meeting that was due to take place after lunch. The man listened to the guy and realized that he really needed to leave. So he buttoned up his jacket and asked Yuan Shao to keep an eye on Yo. And the guy swore after him that this time everything would be all right with them. Yuan Shao wiped away his tears and knelt down and promised himself that this would not happen again. Before leaving the ward, Zhang Xiao glanced at the girl and wished her a speedy recovery. Lu Yi was able to breathe a sigh of relief when Zhang Xiao finally left her room. Now it was time to further carry out the plan that concerned Jiang Wensheng. But right now she could stroke little Yo-Yo's hair and rest a little. When the boy woke up, she asked him if he wanted to talk about something. Yo-Yo sat down next to the girl and silently looked at her and squeezed her nightie in his hands. The boy was very sweet, and the girl tried to remind herself that she needed to get even with her sister. And then Lu Yi suddenly had an idea of how she could leave and do whatever she needed. And she said that she had a puppy at home and she needed to run home for a while and feed him. Yuan Shao became interested in Lu Yi's words. He asked if she really had a puppy. Lu Yi said the first breed she remembered, and now the guys thought she had a poodle. After these words, she immediately remembered Wensheng. She needed to do just that. Lu Yi could not understand why she was lying about having a dog and how she could justify herself later. Yo began to crawl away from the girl. She became agitated and called him back. But then the girl noticed that he took a pencil and was diligently writing something in a notebook. When the boy finished, he handed her a piece of paper on which the word telephone was written. Lu Yi realized that Yu wanted her to leave him her phone number. So she took a piece of paper with a pencil from the boy and wrote her number, adding a small drawing of Yo. The boy was very happy to receive such a nice bonus and Lu Yi's phone number. The girl left the hospital and headed to one of the multi-story buildings in Yuanhai. She came to her old apartment and decided to start living in it. While she was in the corridor, when Sheng called her, he said the video was fake. Lu Yi pretended that she didn't understand what video he was talking about, and when Sheng was surprised. But he decided to pretend that everything was fine and not explain to the girl about the video that caused a scandal. But Lu Yi was not going to let him retreat so easily and insisted that he explain everything. Wen Xing sat on the sofa and asked where the girl was yesterday and why she didn't answer her calls. Lu Yi lied that she fell down the stairs, and Wen Xing began to say that he was very sorry that he could not take care of her. In fact, he was glad that the girl did not get to the award, and Lu Yi felt that the guy was lying to her. But she told him that everything was fine and asked what kind of video she shouldn't believe. Wen Xing became anxious again and said that he would explain everything when he met at the company meeting. The meeting was supposed to take place in an hour, so the girl had to hurry. It's time for the next item on the plan. After entering the office of the company of Bright Entertainment, where the press conference was supposed to take place, there were other people. Among these people were reporters who were filming a story about the events at the Main Stars Award. The journalist said that a press conference was about to begin, at which Wen Xing's wife would appear. She has won the award before and has a good chance now, so the conference was supposed to clarify things. Wen Sheng was very nervous and everyone asked him why Lu Ye was still not there and whether she would even come. The guy couldn't find a place for himself until the next journalist called him to ask a question. He asked if the recent video was the reason for Yi Ji's absence from the conference. Another journalist asked if they had evidence that the video was fake. Wen Sheng ignored the video's questions and said that Yi Ji was stuck in a terrible traffic jam. The journalists continued to call for the guy, shouting over each other when the doors to the conference room opened. And the clicking of heels was heard throughout the room as the girl walked inside. The journalists began to make way for Lu Yai to come forward and admired her appearance. Jiang Wensheng was also very happy that his wife came and now they could settle everything. Lu Yiji looked absolutely beautiful in a long white dress, an aura of tenderness and beauty emanated from her. Those present at the press conference could not take their eyes off the girl in admiration. They even forgot all their questions about the video and could only think about Lu Yi's beauty. Lu Ling Shui looked at her half-sister and was unpleasantly surprised to see her like this. Ling Shui felt uncomfortable, and the guy hinted to Lu Yi about the reason for her being late. The girl said that she really made everyone wait, and then she said that it was raining outside and asked not to forget the umbrellas. After that, the girl sang a song and won all the hearts with her care and song. Reporters began to praise IEG and asked when she would return, because they were still her fans. Lu Yai replied that she had not thought about the future yet, but right now she was extremely happy. She bowed to everyone and thanked them. Lu Ling Shui watched her with apprehension. Lu Ling Shui clenched her fists in anger and believed that Lu Ye was to blame for everything. Wen Sheng whispered something to Lu Yai, and she said she had completely forgotten about the video featuring her husband and sister. She said that most journalists are here to find out the details and get to the bottom of things. Lu Yai said that the video was deliberately shown, just as Wen Sheng said earlier. And as his legal wife, she officially stated that it was not the guy in that video. She was asked if she was sure that it was not Ling Shui in the video, and the girl was waiting for this question. And to Ling Shui's horror, her sister said that she could only be sure of the man's changed appearance. Ling Shui began to approach the girl and asked in a panic what she was talking about. Wen Sheng pushed Ling Shui aside and said that the girl in the video was also faked and the company would investigate later. On this note, the press conference was over, and the reporters saw them off with questions about Ling Shui. Later, Ling Shui's screams could be heard in the office. The girl accused her sister of deliberately speaking ambiguously. Ling Shui was furious and accused the girl of doing this on purpose to discredit her. After that, she huddled close to the guy and cried on her chest. Wen Sheng looked at his wife with fear. Therefore, he left Ling Shui and ran to Yi Ji, convincing her that they were pure in front of her. Lu Yi asked him if it was definitely not him in the video, and Wen Sheng swore with his life that it was not him. Wen Sheng stood in front of the girl and convinced her that he only loved her. And Lu Yi clung to him and suggested to the surprised Wen Sheng that they have a child. Wen Sheng was shocked and asked why the girl was thinking about having a child. Lu Yi said that because she lost her child 5 years ago, she couldn't think about it, but now she's ready again. And then she made her pitiful face and asked Wen Sheng if he was ready for this. Wen Sheng fell for this look and happily agreed to have a child. Lu Ling Shui couldn't find a place to rest with anger when she looked at this couple. She was trying to figure out how to distract Wen Sheng from Lu Yiji so that he could turn his attention to her. Therefore, Ling Shui decided to pretend that she was feeling very bad. Wen Sheng rushed to Ling Shui, and she began to lie that she had a headache from pain. Lu Yai watched the girl's actions with contempt and thought that pretending to be sick was disgusting. The weak like Ling Shui will only receive momentary sympathy, but the strong will always be worthy of worship. And Lu Yi left, and Wen Sheng noticed her disappearance when the girl was already far away. It was late at night, but the light was on in the Imperial Protected Area in Building 9. Zhang Xiao walked down the stairs to the first floor. Even though he was at home, he was still in a suit. Yo-Yo sat in the living room and drew. Zhang Xiao called his son to go have dinner. But the boy did not pay any attention to his dad, looking at the piece of paper. Ken Xiao came closer to take a look and saw the phone number that Lu Yi had left for him. Ken Xiao closed his eyes tiredly and realized that his son missed Lu Yiji. So he picked up the phone and called Yun Tai, asking him to send him Lu Yi's address. It turned out that Yun Tai had already checked everything a long time ago. He had an address, and Yo-Yo got very excited. Zhang Xiao received the necessary information from Yun Ti and issued a call. After that, he called Yo-Yo and said that they were leaving. The boy happily followed his father. Lu Yai was at the supermarket choosing food. She decided that there would be soup for dinner today. The girl returned home when it was already dark outside. She still lived in her old apartment. Lu Yi was cooking and noticed that the broth was almost ready, and soon she could finally have dinner. But she was distracted from cooking by the ringing of the front door. The girl was surprised because she was not expecting guests. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. She was very curious who could come so late. She saw Zhang Xiao outside the door and was very scared. She covered her mouth with her hand to prevent unnecessary sounds. The girl was worried that the man found out that it was she who broke off the engagement 5 years ago. Lu Yi decided to pretend that no one was home and wait for the uninvited guests to leave. Zhang Xiao took out his phone, and the girl remembered that she had given her phone number to the boy. She panicked and started looking for her mobile phone and searched through her clothes. But to her great disappointment, she found him too late, because he had already called. Therefore, Lu Yi had no choice but to open the door and let the guests in. She said hello and asked how they found out her address and why they came so late. The man showed the girl a basket of fruit and said that they had come to visit the victim. On the table there was a glass of orange juice, which the girl served to the guests. Zhang Xiao and his son were sitting on the sofa, and Lu Yi was sitting on the chair opposite, but there was complete silence in the room. Yo-Yo and his father were looking at an apartment, and the girl thought the situation was very awkward, because all this reminded her more of a test of her nerves than a visit to a sick person. She heard the soup begin to boil and remembered that she had been preparing dinner before the guests arrived. Lu Yai pointed to the kitchen and said that her dinner was ready and asked if the guys wanted to eat with her. In fact, she wanted them to leave, but the guests happily agreed to have dinner together. Lu Yaiji didn't expect that Qin Xiao and his son would actually stay to eat her food. She was trying to understand why the owner of $1 billion came to her house with his son to eat her soup. Lu Yai fell from her chair and started screaming that her stomach hurt so bad. She hoped that if the man saw that the mistress was unwell, they would go home. However, Yo-Yo was very quickly next to her and with tears in his eyes, he squeezed her stomach. The girl immediately felt ashamed that she was deceiving such a sweet child, and she hurried to hide in the bathroom, inviting the guests to start dinner without her. Yu watched in surprise at such a sudden change in Lu Yiji's behavior. Meanwhile, the girl locked herself in the bathroom and decided to wait 5 minutes and then go out. 5 minutes later, Lu Yai opened the door and looked at her guests in shock. They actually sat at the table and ate as if nothing had happened. When the girl approached the table, she discovered that not a single piece had been left for her. She silently looked at the empty plates where what was supposed to be her dinner had previously been placed. Lu Yai felt disappointed and a little irritated by the situation, so she invited the guests to go for a walk after such a heavy dinner, and hoped that they would leave. But Zhang Xiao sat down on the sofa in the living room and said that he was so full that he couldn't go. Lu Yi was mentally angry that the man ate all her soup, and now she says that she can't get up. The girl tried to hint that it was already late, and it was high time for the child to go to bed. And that's why it's better for them to return home. Zhang Xiao listened to the girl carefully. And then he agreed with Lu Yi and said that she was saying the right things. The girl was happy, but not for long, because afterwards the man said that they were staying with her overnight. Zhang Xiao looked at his son and told the girl that he wanted to sleep and asked him to put Yao Yao to bed. Lu Yi decided that he was taking revenge on her for breaking the engagement and decided to make her a nanny. But despite all the girl's fervor to prevent him from doing this, she ended up next to the night light in the bedroom. And now Yo-Yo was sleeping next to her. Even though she was angry with the man, she enjoyed spending time with the boy. Zhang Xiao walked past the bedroom and wondered if his son was already asleep. So he walked to the door and opened the doors, looking into Lu Yi's bedroom. In the room, he saw how Yo-Yo and the girl were sleeping sweetly, clinging to each other. The man knew that his son really liked Lu Yaiji, but he didn't expect to see them in this situation. As planned, the guests stayed all night and slept until the morning. Lu Yai woke up in the morning and, stretching, decided to go to the office and continue with the plan. The girl called Mr. Jan and began to get out of bed. The man did not respond, and Lu Yi thought that he had left. She couldn't get out of bed because a child's hand grabbed her nightgown. Lu Yi looked at the boy and tried to think of the best thing to do, and it was decided to take him to work if Yo-Yo promised to obey. The boy agreed to behave well, and they headed to the office of the Vibrant Entertainment Company. Lu Yiji appeared in the building with a child in her arms and attracted everyone's attention. The people around recognized the girl as Lu Yai, and everyone was wondering why she was with the child. The girl herself confidently walked along the corridors, not paying attention to other people's glances, and Yao Yao followed her example. The guy who saw her from the second floor called Mr. Zion and reported the girl's arrival. Lu Yi walked to the elevator and was about to call it and go to the desired floor. But the elevator came down on its own and Wen Sheng came out with a bouquet of flowers. When Lu Yiji saw him, she asked why the guy came downstairs. Yu did not like the man and began to stare gloomily at Wen Sheng. The guy was confused and asked who it was, and the girl said that she was looking after her friend's son. Wen Sheng guessed that it was because of this boy that they had a recent conversation about children. Lu Yai just started to remember about her half-sister and she immediately appeared next to her husband. Ling Shui tried to look friendly and extended her hands towards Yu, but the boy looked at Du Ling Shui with disgust and hid in Lu Yi's arms. The girl asked IEG to teach the boy how to achieve such stunning success. The blonde smiled and said that the company was gaining popularity in particular thanks to Ling Shui. Ling Shui looked at Wen Sheng and said that the girl still thought they were to blame. Wen Sheng asked his wife to leave everything in the past and asked if she trusted them. Lu Yiye looked guilty and said that she didn't mean it at all, and she didn't understand what was wrong with her. Since Ling Shui was here, Lu Yiji had to try to execute Plan B. She began to walk away from Wen Sheng, although he ran after her and continued to call her. But suddenly a guy appeared between them, and Wen Sheng wanted to argue at first, but then he noticed his personality. This guy was Yuan Xiao. The guy seemed to radiate an aura of elegance and confidence. And Wen Sheng looked at Zhang Yuan Xiao and tried to understand what this man was doing in their company. Wen Sheng greeted the guy and asked how he ended up in their company. Yuan Xiao turned at the sound of someone else's voice and recognized the man as Jiang Wen Sheng. He immediately became gloomy and reminded that his family members found it difficult to bear Wen Sheng's presence. After that, Yuan Xiao told him that he could be free and headed to the car with Lu Yiye and Yu. Jiang Wensheng was at a loss and couldn't understand why the guy was here and going to his wife. Ling Shui caught up with the guy and asked if it was Mr. Jan's eldest grandson. Wensheng confirmed the girl's guess and continued to carefully observe what was happening. Ling Shui also watched in silence as the car with her sister and Yuan Xiao drove away. After that, she turned to the guy in alarm and asked if there might be a change in her attitude towards them because of the Jan family. Wensheng said that this is impossible, but the girl reminded that, despite their closeness, Lu Yiye did not tell anything. Ling Shui said that the guy should be more careful and not let Lu Yi cuckold him. The guy thought about it and realized that if Lu Yi wanted to cheat on him, he would do it with incredible ease. Moreover, he suddenly realized that he had not touched Lu Yiye even once in 5 years. He began to suspect that the couple might be together and began urgently looking for Lu Yiye's address. Ling Shui watched as the guy became nervous and began to try to win back Lu Yiye. 2 days have passed since that incident, and now Lu Yi was in her apartment. The girl trimmed the roses that Wen Sheng gave her and arranged them beautifully in the vase. At that moment her doorbell rang, but again she was not expecting anyone to visit. Yo was sitting opposite her at the table, and the girl left him to check who had arrived. Lu Yi walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The girl was shocked by the picture she saw. A confused Wang Sheng and a confident Zhang Xiao stood in front of her door. Lu Yi said that Zhang Xiao had arrived and covered her mouth, and Yao Yao was very happy and wanted to see his father. The girl tried to figure out what to do, because there were 2 people standing outside the door whom she did not want to see. Yao Yao, who decided to open the door to his dad himself, helped her get out of this situation. Lu Yi saw what the boy was going to do and rushed over to try to stop him. But it was too late, and instead of her door handle, her hand fell into the grip of other people's palms. These were Wen Sheng's hands. He smiled and told how long he had been looking for her. Zhang Xiao did not allow them to continue the conversation, as he pushed the guy away and entered the apartment. There he was met by a joyful Yo and they went into the living room while the surprised couple watched. Wen Sheng began to suspect that Lu Yiye and Yuan Ti had some kind of secret and that is why Zhang Xiao came to her. Wen Sheng told the girl that all these 2 days he had been thinking about how he had interfered with her career and was now inviting her to return. Lu Yiye was very pleased that the guy offered this to her. She knew this would happen sooner or later. The girl said it was very nice that the guy thought about this and offered to go grocery shopping with her. Wen Xing happily agreed and they headed out of Lu Ye's apartment. But Zhang Xiao did not let the girl leave and blocked her path with his body, slamming the door. The man asked if the girl was actually going to return to the movies. And Wen Xing had to stand alone in the corridor and get angry at the man through the closed door. Lu Ye thought that Zhang Xiao was too close, and she said that she was going to, but wanted to handle it herself. The man moved even closer and said that he would help if she contacted his company. Lu Ye considered Zhang Xiao's appearance in her life too often to be suspicious, so she refused. Then the man imprisoned the girl in a cage from his arms, and he asked why she didn't want to accept his help. Lu Yai felt trapped under such pressure from the man and tried to come up with an excuse. And then she said that Zhang Xiao is very smart and powerful and she doesn't want people to discuss her. She actually wanted to come back into films on her own so that people would know who the leading actress really was. Zhang Xiao continued to hover over her, and the girl decided to ask him to move away a little. After that, the man left her, but immediately began to complain that the apartment was too cramped. Lu Ye awkwardly apologized and asked if he had any orders regarding this matter. Zhang Xiao turned to the girl and ordered her to pack her things because she was moving in with him. Lu Ye wondered in horror whether he liked him and whether the man was going to marry her, and said out loud that it was too early for that. Qin Shao looked at his son and noticed that Yu had become very attached to the girl. Lu Yai felt very stupid when she heard the man's answer like that. And she began to scold herself for the fact that she understood everything wrong and that Jan Xiao was doing this only for her son. She was very embarrassed about this and said that she was doing a great job of taking care of Yo here too. The girl suggested that Zhang Xiao return on his own, because so little time had passed. But the man did not seem to listen to her and said that tomorrow he would send a man for her things. And after that, Zhang Xiao left Lu Ye's apartment, leaving the last word for himself. This angered the girl, and she decided that she would not move anywhere and would hide and seek tomorrow. At 5 in the morning it was still dark outside, but Lu Yi had already gotten out of bed. She carefully covered Yo and left a teddy bear next to him. After that, the girl took her slippers and tiptoed towards the exit of the bedroom. And when she was in the corridor, she heard strange sounds at her front door. Lu Yi looked through the peephole and saw people in suits there, and they had boxes of tools in their hands. The girl decided that bandits were trying to get to her and clearly heard the lock open. The door to the apartment opened, and Yuan Xiao and the guys in suits appeared on the threshold. Lu Yai was wearing sunglasses and a mask, and she tried to pretend to be an ordinary cleaning lady. Yuan Xiao looked at the girl and then laughed and asked Lu Ye what she was doing. The girl tried to pretend that the guy had made a mistake and said that she worked here as a nanny. But the guy told IEG that she was doing poorly and if he didn't bring her, his uncle would quickly make a wig out of him. In Lu Ye's head, the image of Zhang Xiao immediately appeared in his head, drawing his sword from its sheath. But the girl decided not to deviate from the plan and squeezed past the men. She convinced them that she was just a nanny. Lu Yai ran out into the corridor and hurried to the exit of the building. Nobody stopped her. Yuan Xiao decided that she would not run away anyway, but now she needed to pack her things. Therefore, the guy began to give orders and ordered that all the things that were in the apartment be moved to the car. Then he chose 2 guys in suits and ordered them to follow him. It was dark outside and early in the morning there was no one around the house, so it was easy to observe the situation. Lu Ye was hiding behind a pillar and saw that no one was following her, and hoped that they believed her. She came out of her hiding place and a white car screeched to a stop next to her. It was Wen Sheng, who invited the girl to have breakfast together and was happy about the sudden meeting. Lu Ye couldn't believe that she was actually able to meet a guy by chance at 5 in the morning. She lied to him that she was going to the hospital for a checkup so she couldn't go to breakfast. But the guy jumped out of the car and excitedly began to persuade the girl to give her a ride. Lu Yai began to deny it and changed the topic to returning to the cinema. She promised to come to the office tomorrow and talk about it. In order to somehow get rid of the guy, she asked if he could go to the office and prepare all the documents. Naturally, when Sheng wanted to please the girl, he agreed with her words and went to the car. It was only when his car drove away that Lu Yai was able to breathe out a sigh of relief. When Sheng headed to the office to prepare everything for tomorrow's meeting and wished him good luck at the hospital, Yuan Ti quickly saw the girl and told her that she had not run far all this time. Lu Yiye did not expect to see the guy because she thought that she was not being chased. Yunt pointed at the girl and ordered the guys he took with him to prevent her from running away. Lu Yi was worried and nervously asked the guys what they were up to. Yunt told the girl that something happened to Yao Yao after the girl left. Yi Ji froze when she heard about the boy, she was very worried about him. The girl screamed with obvious excitement in her voice, asking what happened to Yo-Yo. Yunt refused to talk, but suggested that the girl go back to the apartment and find out for herself. When Lu Yiye reached her floor, she saw the boy sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. She did not expect to see him in the corridor, especially so upset, and she was also upset. Yo-Yo was crying, and you could feel even from a distance how upset he was. Lu Yiye's heart broke when she saw the boy in such a state, but she also noticed that there was not a single thing left in her apartment and began to shout at the guy. She asked where her things were, and Yunt asked, a little surprised, if his uncle had told her anything. And then he explained to the evil girl that the boy did not want to part with Lu Yi, and his uncle did not like this apartment. The guy approached the girl and asked her to tell her what was happening between him and Uncle Jan. And although Lu Yi said that there was nothing between them, the guy approached and asked if they hadn't had any fun that night. The girl slowly thought through all the guy's words and hints and her eyes began to widen. She blushed greatly and was embarrassed by such an assumption in her direction and did not know what to say. And then she screamed that there really was nothing between them and her face turned even redder. Yunt demanded to know why Zhang Xiao suddenly wanted her to move in with him. But because the guy called her auntie, she redirected her embarrassment into anger and started swearing at him. And then she said that since he calls her aunt, she has every right to demand that all things be returned to their places. But Yunt said that he could not do this and asked Auntie not to make his work difficult. He explained that her uncle had ordered all her things to be moved quickly, so now she had to take the boy and go to the car. Lu Yi said she didn't want to, and Yunt asked if uncle really showed himself so badly, since she didn't want him so much. This assumption knocked all the air out of Lu Yiji's lungs, she was very angry, and she reminded the guy that there was nothing between him and his uncle, neither bad nor good. The girl felt that Yo-Yo was calling her and lowered her eyes to find out what he wanted. The boy pulled the girl's dress to attract her attention, and when Lu Yiji looked at him, Yo-Yo began to look at her with a pleading look. The girl could not resist such an insidious weapon that Yao Yao used. And then the boy hugged her, while Yunt said that he also noticed Yao Yao's affection. Yunt said that there is nothing like that in her house, only that horseradish pesters her every day. Lu Yi went down to the boy and stroked his head. She asked if he had a mother. Yunt spread his hands and said that he had never seen her, and his uncle preferred not to talk about it. Lu Yiji fell silent and began to think about moving to Yao Yao again, and she decided to agree after all, but promised to leave if she noticed that she was being deceived. The guy agreed, but he himself thought that they would not be able to leave their uncle if he moved there. They were in a huge house when the sun was already fully illuminating the streets and breaking through the windows. The guy brought the girl into the room and said that now she would belong to her aunt. The room looked very elegant, it had a large bed and was well lit. There was also a fireplace in the corner, next to which there was a cozy chair with small pillows. Lu Yiji turned to Yunt and asked displeasedly where her things had gone. Suddenly, Zhang Xiao appeared behind her. He said that they were too cheap, and if they didn't like something, they would buy new ones. Lu Yi told him that everything in the room was somehow not very good, and I tried to find the right words. Yunt began to whisper to the girl that if she stayed and took care of Yao Yao, she would receive a high salary. Lu Yi unexpectedly heard about the salary and thought seriously. Her share in the company was small, but the Jan family's salary must have been impressive. Lu Yi asked unsure if this was true, and the guy said she might even sign the contract. The girl folded her arms over her chest and said that she would read everything carefully before signing anything. Yunt immediately took out a folder with a contract from his inner pocket and handed it to the girl. Lu Yi accepted the folder, although she did not expect to receive the contract so quickly. Kan Xiao watched her carefully. The girl opened the folder and saw that she needed to take part in Yo-Yo's daily affairs. She couldn't believe her eyes because they paid 20,000 yuan a month. It was a huge amount and the girl tried to find out if Mr. Kan thought it was too much. But the man misunderstood her and said that he could increase the amount if Lu Yi thought it was not enough. The girl began to deny and convinced the man that everything was in order and this money was enough. but she decided to ask how they would act if she wanted to quit. Zhang Xiao looked at her and said that they would discuss this if necessary. Lu Yi was doubtful, but Yuan Ti reminded her that they held a prominent position in the city and would not deceive her. The girl thought about his words and decided that there was no point in the Jan family deceiving her. And since Lu Yiji did not intend to deceive them herself, the girl easily signed the contract. Yuan Ti happily took the contract and offered to give the girl a tour of their house. The guy walked forward, talking about the layout, and Lu Yi decided that such a huge empty house was affecting the child. It was time for lunch, and the entire Jiang family, along with Lu Yai, were sitting at the huge table. Lu Yiji took various foods from the communal plates and offered them to Yu Yu to try. Zhang Xiao watched the interaction between his son and Lu Yiye with a happy smile. The girl put the child to bed and decided that she would go to the shower and sleep, since she woke up very early. Lu Yiji took a towel and complained that it was too far to walk to the bathroom. But her attention was attracted by the screams that were heard from the room with the door ajar. Yuan Tai shouted that he couldn't believe that Auntie was the girl who broke off the engagement. Lu Yiye was shocked. The guy continued to ask his interlocutor whether Zhang Xiao himself knew about this fact. But Lu Yiji was already paralyzed by fear, and she wanted to escape from this house as quickly as possible. The girl panicked so much that she did not notice that they were approaching her, and someone else's hand hung over her shoulders. After which, Qin Xiao appeared behind him. He asked Lu Yai what she was doing in the corridor. Lu Yiji was very frightened by such an unexpected appearance of a man, but she ordered herself to calm down. The girl turned around and worriedly said that she just decided to take a short walk after a hearty dinner. Zhang Zhao's personality filled the girl with terror, and it was surprising that she was able to deceive him. The man bowed his head slightly and ordered the girl to come down and walk below. Lu Yi easily agreed and dreamed of being as far away from Zhang Xiao as possible. But the man surprised her when he said that they would go for a walk together. Of course, Lu Yi was not very happy and Zhang Xiao noticed something in the girl that alarmed him. The man asked if she was afraid of him, and the girl said that she had to be a little afraid, since he was her boss. Zhang Xiao started to leave the girl, but asked her to follow him into the office to talk about it. The girl was very afraid that Zhang Xiao wanted to discuss their engagement 5 years ago. She began to think about escaping to her apartment, but it was unsafe there. There was an option to go abroad. But in this case, Lu Yi could not properly carry out her plan to deal with the traitors. And she was determined about this, therefore, I was able to find the courage not to run anywhere. Yo-Yo ran up to her and hugged the girl by the dress. Lu Yiji didn't expect to see him. But the boy gave her an ingenious solution to the problem, which she was sure to use. The girl came to Zhang Zhao's office and knocked. The man immediately allowed her to enter. She came to Mr. Jan with Yo-Yo in her arms, and this surprised the man very much. Lu Yi was sure that as long as the boy was nearby, Zhang Xiao would not be able to finish her off. The man closed his eyes and asked his son to leave the office for a couple of minutes. Neither Lu Yi nor Yu Yu expected this from the man and even panicked a little. The girl sadly looked at the boy, begging him not to leave her in a difficult situation. But Yao Yao didn't understand what the girl's look meant and calmly left his father's office. Lu Yiji humbly lowered her head and prepared for all possible outcomes, but she couldn't resist and screamed that a few years ago she had no choice, even though it was too much. Zhang Xiao was surprised because he hadn't really explained anything yet, but the girl already understood everything. Zhang Xiao only ordered to check her relationship with Jiang Wensheng, but it was already clear that it was not easy for her. The man smiled softly looking at the girl, and he said that he understood everything. He cleared his throat and said that he would not harm her since she was taking good care of his son and released the girl. Lu Yai couldn't believe her luck. She stood outside the office and realized that she was afraid of this conversation in vain. From an overabundance of emotions, the girl burst into tears and thought that a miracle had happened to her. Morning finally arrived and everyone gathered for breakfast. There was orange juice and toast with scrambled eggs on the table. Lu Yi sat next to the boy and offered him a piece of bread. The girl felt happy. She took a glass of juice and began to drink it with great pleasure. But Lu Yiji choked and coughed, carefully covering her mouth with her hand. Zhang Xiao noticed this and immediately reached for a napkin to give it to the girl. The man wanted to take care of her, but Lu Yiji just stared at him and felt very embarrassed. So she abandoned her breakfast, apologized to everyone, and then ran to her room. When the girl was in her room, she began to calm her heartbeat and tried to understand what Zhang Xiao was doing. But Lu Yi checked her phone and saw 12 missed calls from Wen Sheng and one from a foreign number. The girl called back the unknown person, and the guy's voice told her that he had finally returned. The guy was standing in front of the cafe. He saw Lu Yi and started waving and calling her. The girl gave him a high five and asked if he had found a daughter-in-law while he was abroad. The guy said that his mother does not accept anyone except his childhood friend i.e.g. The blonde pouted and said that Hong Dan Zui has not changed at all and remains just as annoying. A passing girl noticed the beauties near the restaurant, but her friend was sure that there was a guy and a girl there. Zhang Xiao followed the girl and now also watched the guys from the car. He turned to Yo-Yo and asked if he had seen the guy who wanted to steal his expectant mother. The boy immediately felt hostility towards that man, and he puffed out his cheeks cutely. Lu Yi and her friend were having lunch and discussing how they could return to stardom together and support each other. The girl thought that Xiao Bai had not changed at all. He was attractive, and when he laughed, he radiated warmth. Zhang Xiao watched the couple having a pleasant conversation and felt irritated. Lu Yi blushed and couldn't understand why she was thinking such things about her best friend. Suddenly, Yo-Yo ran up to her and hugged her. The girl asked where he came from. She started looking around the cafe trying to find John Yuan in the cafe, but he was nowhere to be found. Xiao Bai looked at the boy in surprise and asked if this was Yi Ji's son. The girl said that everything was a little confusing. She took the boy in her arms and offered him something to eat. Yo-Yo looked at the guy, and from his look you could tell that he didn't like him. Xiao Bai felt awkward, but still wanted to know whose child it was that came to the girl. At that moment, Zhang Xiao appeared next to their table and irritably told the guy that it was his son. Lu Yi did not expect to see Zhang Xiao himself in such a cafe and was no less surprised than other visitors. The man didn't ask anything and unceremoniously sat down at the guy's table, which greatly surprised them. Lu Yi awkwardly apologized and said that the food from this cafe might not be good enough for a man. Zhang Xiao didn't say anything because the waiter came to their table and brought him beef Wellington. The man in the suit finished all the details and announced that they had already purchased the building. The girl realized that she had to introduce the guys to each other and tried to do it. But Xiao Bai had already shaken the man's hand and said that the girl was talking about him. He replied that he had never heard of him. Xiao Bai said that they are friends who can't let go of each other and this angered Qin Xiao. Therefore, he said that Yi Ji lives in his house and they will not be able to keep in touch. The guys looked into each other's eyes, challenging, and the atmosphere became noticeably tense. This could be felt especially well from Zhang Zhao's side, but no one was going to retreat. Lu Yi tried to ignore it and invited Yu to try the delicious hugua. The men heard this and directed all their attention to the girl, and under their gaze she felt very uncomfortable. Therefore, Lu Yi decided to escape from this place, and she invited the boy to go home. The men unanimously offered to give the girl a ride home, and Lu Yi was alarmed. She stood up and asked her friend to go away and talk to her for a moment. The girl took the guy aside and apologized for not being able to go with him and promised to call him later. Xiao Bai accepted this answer from his friend and did not impose himself, only said that he would wait for a call. Lu Yi returned to Mr. Kan and said that she would go with him because they needed to discuss something. Lu Yi found herself in the tender embrace of Qin Xiao while he gently kissed the surprised girl. She looked at the man during the kiss and could not understand how it happened. Shortly before these events, they were in the office, and the girl said that she was going to return with a friend. Zhang Xiao did not understand this because his company had more favorable conditions for development. Yi Ji said that she understands the capabilities of Mr. Zhang's company, but wants to rely on her own efforts. At that moment, the door opened and an alarmed Yuan Ti came running, shouting about the disaster. He showed a news article on his phone where Lu Yi was accused of being the kept woman of a wealthy heir. The girl read the entire article with horror, and then saw that the news portal belonged to the Mandarin publication. She thought about it and remembered that Ling Shui's good friends worked there, which means it was probably her idea. Qin Xiao said that he would not allow anyone to touch his girlfriend. Lu Yi turned to him and wanted to ask who his girlfriend was. But the man did not let her finish, and leaned towards her for a kiss, which served as an answer to the unfinished question. After the kiss, Lu Yi, completely embarrassed, rushed to her room at the speed of light. Zhang Xiao ordered Yuan Ti to quickly call all publications, and he said that the guy knows what to do. The guy saluted and said that he could relax, and he would do everything right. The next day came and Ling Shui was looking forward to reading about her sister's troubles. But bad news awaited her. All the articles were dedicated to her and showed her in a terrible light. Ling Shui jumped out of bed in a panic. She couldn't understand how this could happen. The girl realized with horror and despair that all these articles and recent events would completely destroy her career. Ling Shui's friends called and apologized, but said that they could not refuse the representatives of the Jan family. It was as if Zhang Xiao himself had appeared in front of her, looking down on her and reminding her that the whole city was in his hands. Ling Shui cried with anger because Lu Ye had received all the best since childhood. But now the girl decided that she would not allow her to be happy for long and began to look for something on the computer. After some searching, a website appeared in front of Ling Shui where people could hire an assassin. There was a killer K on the dark net. He was one of the most dangerous killers in the whole world. Once this killer, with one laconic maneuver, he eliminated one of the most dangerous gangs. There are no rules for this man, he will kill anyone if he is paid well enough. Ling Shui opened the chat and wrote that the girl should die, and she sent the photo to Lu Yi. They agreed that the girl would send 25 million immediately and after completion, she would give back the same amount. Ling Shui was pleased with herself and was already imagining how she would come to Lu Yiji's funeral. Killer K came to the house where his victim lived and approached the entrance with a smile on his face. He rang the doorbell and Yuan Ti opened the door for him and asked the man who he was. The man looked friendly and said that he was from the internet maintenance service and had come for a routine check. After that, Yuan Tai became serious and looked at the man in front of him carefully. He asked the man to show his ID, and the killer reached into his bag. A knife appeared in Yuan Ti's hand, which he twirled right in front of the man. The killer noticed this gesture and recognized his knife in the stranger's hand and froze in surprise and shock. He checked the place where his dagger should have been, and he tried to understand when the guy took him. Yuan Ti traced the blade and said that their family had their own workers, so it immediately became clear that he was an imposter. The guy asked to tell him who he was, but the killer decided to run away as quickly as possible. Yuan Ti shouted after him to stop immediately, and the guards began to come to the screams. Yuan Ti and the guards ran after the man. The guy wanted to know what he needed from the Jan family. The killer said that he would have finished him off if he had a dagger, and Yuan Ti ordered to stop and pick him up. The killer managed to hide among the trees and Yuan Ti ordered increased patrols around the house. The man was hiding behind one of the bushes and breathing heavily, realizing that this plan had completely failed. So the next day, he watched Lu Yi in her room through binoculars. He compared the appearance of the girl in the photo to make sure that she was the one he needed. He took out a sniper rifle and was already looking forward to getting his 50 million. Behind him was the silhouette of a guy who asked who hired the man. The killer got scared when he heard someone else's voice. The man said that he did not know who the guy was and added that now Killer K himself would deal with him. Xiao Bai jumped down to be at the same roof level as the man, and he asked if he was K. The man didn't even have time to open his mouth to answer when blood gushed from his shoulder. The guy held a bloody knife in his hand and asked the man who he was then. The man trembled and turned to the guy behind him. He was scared because a real Killer K was standing in front of him. Xiao Bai entered the world of show business as a young and carefree guy who played only one role in an amateur performance. He was standing on the set among many people, but IG caught his attention. And it was then that he first met the diligent and hardworking Lu Yiji. The day this happened, Xiao Bai fell in love with a beautiful girl. Therefore, in order to earn her favor, he also began to diligently study acting. The guy gave himself completely to each of his roles, even when he had to perform stunts. They had been friends for a long time, and Xiao Bai decided to confess to the girl when they were on the ship. The couple was standing on the deck having a nice conversation when Xiao Bai's phone suddenly rang. The guy asked Lu Yi to wait for a while and walked away to answer the call. But that day he learned that his parents, who remained in another country, died due to local gang violence. That same night, Xiao Bai left, leaving his career. He wanted to avenge his parents at all costs. The guy stood in the rain, wiping the blood from his knife. He was covered in abrasions and small cuts. Xiao Bai was sure that while he was gone, Yi Ji would continue to live the same life as before. So when she decided to leave show business, the guy thought that Yi Ji was just tired. And only then did he realize that everything was not so simple and that it was likely that something had happened to her that night on the ship. For a long time, Xiao Bai and Lu Yiji did not call or write to each other. And after the guy killed the last member of the gang, he discovered that the girl was drawn into a series of events. And Xiao Bai was sure that there was one person behind all this, who pulled Ye Ji in. Perhaps it was Zhang Xiao, with whom she now lived and took care of his son. But for Xiao Bai, this was not very important since he had the opportunity to take care of her. The guy turned away from the Jan family's house and began to walk away from the edge of the roof. He left and thought that he simply could not afford to lose his only love again. The morning came and the house of the Qin family was flooded with rays of sunshine as the weather was beautiful. Qin Shao walked to the door of Lu Yiji's room and knocked. And when no one answered him, the man grabbed the doorknob and opened the door. In the bedroom, Lu Yi and Yu were fast asleep on the bed next to each other. Zhang Xiao looked at this picture with tenderness and a slight smile and did not wake them up. The man took the blanket and covered Lu Yiji tighter. He thought the girl was very cute when she slept. At that moment the girl began to wake up. She opened her eyes and looked ahead. Lu Yi was very frightened when she saw the silhouette of a man reaching out to her. So she jumped up on the bed and, screaming, slapped the intruder in the face, defending herself. The man was silent, and on his face there was a huge red mark from the girl's palm. Lu Yi recognized the man as Zhang Xiao and panicked when she realized that she had not hit a bandit. The man glanced in her direction, and it seemed to the girl that he was very angry with her. She started screaming that she didn't hit him on purpose and grabbed Yo Yua so he would protect her. Zhang Xiao's hand landed near her head and the girl looked at the man expectantly. He looked smug and said that he would forgive this trick just for the kiss. Lu Yiji was very embarrassed, especially when I remembered their recent kiss in the office. She put her hand in front of her and flatly refused to kiss the man. Zhang Xiao took the girl's hand in his own and Lu Yi became even more confused with embarrassment. She tried to take her hand back and move back, but she didn't succeed. The man was very close to her again, and the girl froze, looking straight into his eyes. Yao Yao watched this and was very happy to see his parents getting closer, so he shouted joyfully. And then he jumped on top of his parents, despite the fact that he was asked not to play around. Lu Yi picked the boy up and carried him to the bathroom, explaining that he needed to brush his teeth in the morning. But Zhang Xiao was not upset, he remained sitting on the bed, watching their interaction with a smile. Yuan Ti met his uncle in the corridor and said that they needed to discuss yesterday's events. He handed over a photo of the killer and said that yesterday this man tried to break into the house and managed to escape. Qin Shao looked and said that he understood everything and asked if there was anything else he needed to know. Yuan Ti said that he and Yao Yao were asked to come to the old house for a couple of days. Qin Shao listened to this information and was a little surprised that he was going to travel. Satisfied, Lu Ling Shui walked next to Wen Sheng and was already anticipating how wonderful the day would be. She hugged the guy and thanked him for his help in getting a new role. Wen Sheng said that he was confident in her and noticed that the girl was very happy. Ling Shui said that it was because of the casting. In fact, it was not because of the new role, and Ling Shui laughed lightly. She imagined Lu Yi's body, which had long since cooled down, because she was sure that the killer had done his job. And when Xingwu said that she was suddenly able to breathe freely for the first time in a long time. In her dreams, Ling Shui came to the right place, where she was met and escorted by a nice woman. Jiang Wensheng stopped uncertainly and saw Lu Yi in front of him in confusion. The girl stood surrounded by journalists and gave interviews. Everyone around her laughed and complimented Lu Yi. Ling Shui also saw this picture, only this shocked her even more, since she was sure that the girl was no longer there. She grabbed her phone and tried to figure out why she was here and still alive. When Ling Shui went to the darknet and wanted to contact the killer, it turned out that he interrupted their communication session. The girl realized that she had wasted as much as 25 million and began to cry from the injustice. She fell to her knees and grabbed her head, trying to understand why she was doing this, when Xing walked up to her. He wanted to find out what happened to the girl, but Ling Shui grabbed his arm and threw him over her. Then, in a fit of anger, she attacked the guy who didn't understand anything and hit him on the back. Lu Yi saw them and greeted them with the sweetest look, attracting the attention of the reporters. The couple found themselves in a very awkward position and realized that they did not look in the best light. Ling Shui tried to pretend that nothing had happened, and she said she was flattered that Miss Star was talking to her. Lu Yiji came closer and said that she was just about to hold a press conference to announce her return. Ling Shui could only see the reporter behind her stepsister who was filming Lu Yi. She also got into the frame, so Ling Shui tried to keep her face and not spoil her image. Therefore, the girl laughed unnaturally and tried to look friendly and congratulated her sister. Lu Yi looked at Wen Sheng and said that she also had something to discuss with him. She said that she had contacted the main shareholders of their company and a general meeting would be held soon. Wen Sheng was shocked when he heard that there would be a redistribution of shares at the meeting. It was a beautiful sunny day and around the Jan family's house, as always, it was deserted. Except for one exception in the form of Wen Sheng, who stood in the shade of the trees and looked at Lu Yi's new place of residence. The guy wanted to meet the girl and tell her how much he loved her, so that the girl would go crazy from his confession. He brought a bouquet with him and was sure that then the girl would immediately forget about the shares and their division. Wen Sheng couldn't wait for her to appear when Yuan Ti passed by and noticed the guy. He called Jiang Wen Sheng and the guy turned to him and felt awkward from such a meeting. Yuan Ti was eating ice cream and, looking at Wen Sheng, saw a bouquet of flowers in his hands. He walked closer and threw his arm over Wen Sheng's shoulder and said that they had something to discuss. Yuan Ti said that the guy was waiting for his aunt, but in fact, she had long left through the back door. Jiang Wensheng fussily said that he understood everything and tried to leave the territory of the Jiang family and quickly leave Yuan Ti, but he failed to do so as Yuan Ti's hand rested on his shoulders again, stopping Wensheng. The guy had a knife in his hand and told the frightened Wensheng that he was ready to surprise him. After this meeting, Wensheng hurried back to his car as quickly as possible. When he got to her, he began to drive somewhere and call IEG, who did not answer the phone. The sky was clear and you could hear the sounds the helicopter made during the flight. Lu Yiji sat inside and felt that she could not understand how everything happened. And why is she right now in a helicopter flying somewhere at the crack of dawn? She turned to Mr. Jan next to her and realized that it was all because of him. Yiji's screams that she would never go with them to her parents could be heard far outside the house. However, Zhang Xiao did not listen to her and simply threw her over his shoulder, despite the girl's screams and demands to let her go. Lu Yiji was only allowed to sit on the helicopter seat, and she groaned with displeasure when she landed. Zhang Xiao immediately buckled the girl and, hovering over her, said that she was Yu Yu's official mother, so she was going with them. The girl shouted that taking care of Yo-Yo and going to see the man's parents could not be equal things. Zhang Xiao looked at the girl carefully and was silent for a while, which surprised Lu Yiye. He patted his son on the head and said that the child had no mother from a young age. And so every time he goes to play with his peers, the children start laughing at him. They point their fingers at him and whisper unpleasantly behind his back. They call him a savage who has no mother. And they say that since he doesn't have a mother, that means he's an adopted child, and Yo-Yo suffers because of it. Lu Yai hugged the boy to her and started shouting that no one would dare to bully her son. Zhang Xiao did not argue with her, but buckled himself up and said that then they could fly. The man covered his mouth with his hand, but Louis still noticed that he was trying to hide his smile, and only then did she realize that no one would dare to mock a child from the Jan family. The helicopter with the girl was already flying when she clearly realized that she had been fooled. Lu Yai wearily bowed her head and admitted that it was very difficult to fight the man in any way. She looked at Qin Zhao's profile and was very curious to know what he really was like. Zhang Xiao looked down through the helicopter window and told his son and Lu Yiye that they had arrived home. The girl leaned over the man and began to look down with interest. There she saw a whole island, which was full of trees and only a small number of houses. Lu Yi asked if the man really had such a big house on the island. And Zhang Xiao simply replied that, in fact, this entire mountain belongs to him. They began to land, and the girl was very interested in whether it was even legal to have her own mountain. After landing, Ken Xiao, Yu Yu and Lu Yi got out of the helicopter and walked towards the car. The driver was already waiting for them next to the car. As they were driving, the girl saw something that scared her. A real tiger was walking right next to the car, and a deer's throat was clamped in its mouth. Lu Yi screamed as the car let the animal pass, but Zhang Xiao calmed her down and said that the tiger was tamed. The girl couldn't believe that a tiger with a deer in its mouth might not be dangerous and tried to understand what she had gotten herself into. After some time, they finally arrived at the main house and headed towards the entrance. Lu Yi led Yu Yu by the hand, and the Jan family's servants were waiting for them at the door. They respectfully greeted Zhang Xiao and said that the master was in the hall and had been waiting for him for a long time. Lu Yiye felt as if she was in a museum, and she laughed a little, but did not tell the man why. Zhang Xiao put his hand on the girl's shoulders and pulled the surprised Lu Yi towards him. He quietly told her that they should put on a show and he hoped she could play along. The girl stood straight next to the man and looked back at him with displeasure, after which Lu Yi closed her eyes and touched her long beautiful hair, and she threw them back, entering the image of a loving wife and mother. She radiated confidence. Lu Yi walked forward with a slight smile on her lips, while Zhang Xiao watched her in surprise. The girl found herself right in front of the shocked man and straightened his tie. She called him darling and agreed to go, and went to Yo-Yo to take his hand. Zhang Xiao didn't expect the girl to become so assertive and confident so quickly and was a little taken aback. But soon Lu Yi caught up and, as if nothing had happened, pressed her to his waist. The girl deliberately nudged him a little with her elbow, and I thought the man was a little annoying. They very quickly found themselves in front of the entrance to the room where the whole family was waiting for them. The chairs in the room were arranged in a circle and all but 3 were already occupied. The men who were sitting on the left immediately noticed the appearance of new people. An elderly man sat in the center, wearing sunglasses, and it was hard to tell where he was looking. The man and woman who were sitting on the right side also studied all 3 of them carefully. Zhang Xiao nodded politely and greeted his great-grandfather. It was the first time Lu Yi had seen a guy like this. Great-grandfather sat in the center and leaned on his cane. He greeted Xiao back. Can Xiao placed his hand on the top of Yu Yu's head and asked the child to honor his grandfather. However, the atmosphere in the room began to noticeably darken as the men began to look at the child. The aura that came from the people on the right side was no better. Therefore, Yao Yao felt uncomfortable and was afraid to walk past these people, and hid behind Lu Yi. The girl asked the boy not to be afraid, and then leaned over to him and said that he could go and say hello to his grandfather. Yo-Yo wanted to show how much he respected his grandfather and ran into the man's arms. The man put the child in his arms and smiled happily at him, after which he treated Yo-Yo to some candy. Zhang Xiao had already taken his place on one of the empty chairs, and Lu Yi stood next to him. Zhang Xiao looked at the girl at the chair next to him, and Lu Yi realized that she should sit down too. She sat down hesitantly and tried to look at the man to get confirmation that her actions were correct. When Lu Yi sat down on the chair, the atmosphere in the room changed from oppressive to surprised, and the girl asked Xiao who this girl who came with him was. Zhang Xiao introduced the girl to his relatives as Yu Yu's mother. This shocked all the people in the room, and the girl completely jumped out of her chair. The girl who asked the question came closer and asked if Qin Xiao was sure about this. He replied that he was sure, but the further argument was interrupted by another guy. He said that the great-grandfather should speak out first. These words had an effect, and everyone sat down in their places and began to look at their great-grandfather in anticipation. Each family member expected the man to begin his speech and tell him why they had gathered. But great-grandfather was busy. He was playing one of the games on his tablet with Yo-Yo and didn't pay any attention to them. So I had to ask my great-grandfather to start again, and the man called Xiao Wan. Another man appeared in the room. He was dressed in a suit and came out from his great-grandfather's side. The guy said that he was Mr. Kan's lawyer and said that they could call him Xiao Wan. The relatives who were sitting on the same side as Zhang Xiao became interested and surprised. The men opposite were also surprised and looked intently at the lawyer. Zhang Xiao remained absolutely calm and glanced around and at the lawyer. Wang Xiao adjusted his glasses and said that today he would act as the family notary and read the will. Lu Yi thought that it was in vain to feign joy and fun earlier if they were going to divide the property. Suddenly, Lu Yi saw servants appear nearby and close the doors. Wang Xiao announced to everyone that he was starting and opened his briefcase, to which all attention was focused. The room seemed to be filled with a glow that emanated from the will of the eldest Mr. Jan. Family members, in addition to the main heir, received working and fixed assets, as well as shares worth 2% of the total. Lu Yi couldn't believe that just 2% meant an amount of 1,200,000,000. The Jan family had a huge fortune, but needed an heir who could maintain the prosperity. You could see how the men sitting on the left side became gloomy. So did the rest of the relatives who were present at the meeting. Lu Yi thought that they looked as if they were not satisfied with 1,200,000,000 yuan. When Song Ji screamed that it wasn't fair, and one of the guys asked her to calm down, great-grandfather did not pay attention to other people's dissatisfaction and asked Yo-Yo what he loved most. Song Ji put in a lot of effort to control her anger. The boy pointed towards his parents and the man realized that most of all he loved his mom and dad. And after Yao Yao turned to his grandfather and pointed at him too. The man was overjoyed when Yo-Yo added him to the list. Wang Xiao continued to say that the main heir was chosen based on personal traits and abilities. And Zhang Xiao was the one who was more suitable to be the main heir and receive the fortune. Song Ji sat next to the guy and began to look in shock at Qin Xiao, who was now the official heir. Zhang Xiao simply nodded at this news, without showing any unnecessary emotions to the others. Lu Yiji was excited to hear the news and looked at her companion in shock. Song Ji jumped up from her seat again and started shouting that Qin Xiao was not even related to them by blood, and his personal life cannot be called decent, because no one knows who this girl is and whose child it is. Therefore, Sun Ji believed that the guy was not worthy of being the main heir. Great-grandfather listened to her screams in silence. The guy who constantly stopped her tried to do it again and shouted at the girl. And then he turned to his great-grandfather that the issue of the inheritance of the Jan family should not be resolved so easily. The man with a mustache, who had previously been silent, encouraged the guy to take a more serious approach to this issue. Almost all the relatives expressed their opinions and looked at the elder Mr. Ken in anticipation of the verdict. The man looked up and began to carefully examine everyone present in the room. And the relatives created a heavy and gloomy atmosphere and waited for his words. Great-grandfather pointed to Lu Yiya and asked her to come to him since she was Zhao's wife. The girl, like everyone else, did not expect to be called, and I was a little confused. Zhang Xiao looked at her and reminded her that the master called her to him. And then with a smile he asked if she was really not a world-class actress and was afraid. Lu Yiji accepted the challenge and frowned. She was going to prove to the guy that she was not afraid at all. Therefore, the girl got up from her seat and, as if nothing had happened, went to her great-grandfather. Zhang Xiao watched how confidently the girl played her role and smiled contentedly. When Lu Yi approached, she patted Yu Yu on the top of his head and said that he missed his grandfather very much. After that, she bowed slightly and introduced herself, and the man said that he was tired and asked her to accompany him. Yi Ji easily agreed, took Yo-Yo's hand and headed towards the exit with the man. This was absolutely not what the disgruntled relatives expected from the great-grandfather, so they watched them go, and the atmosphere in the room again became extremely unpleasant. The meeting was considered completed, and the choice of the main heir in the person of Jan Xiao was final. Sun Ji once again jumped up from her seat with the intention of stopping Mr. Kan. However, the man told her to ask all questions to Xiao Wang, because he did not have the strength to fight. The servants opened the door for them and all three left the meeting room, heading to rest. Xiao Wang said that the capital would pass to the heir only after the death of his grandfather, but in the meantime he would find out what could be changed. Yi Ji led her grandfather, but all her thoughts were occupied with the fact that Zhang Xiao would have to continue the family business. But she was very worried about the fact that the rest of the family were very unhappy with this state of affairs. Lu Yiji reminded herself that this had nothing to do with her because she was a person of a different level. And while Lu Yi was thinking about this, in the large hall behind her, the showdown was not going to stop. Song Ji loudly slammed her hand on the table and shouted why everything was happening this way. She looked angrily at Qin Xiao, who was sitting next to him absolutely calm, and he didn't even pay attention to her. The guy who was calming Sun Ji at the meeting approached him, and he asked Zhang Xiao to come out and talk to him. But the man did not move and said that if he wanted to talk, he could do it here. The guy did not expect to receive a refusal and was considering whether to talk to him in front of witnesses. However, Song Ji did not care about other people and said that she advised him not to forget his position. Zhang Xiao smiled at her and said that all the issues regarding his position were very clear to him. Song Ji was so angry at his behavior that her body began to tremble with anger and irritation. And she shouted to him that the issue of inheritance was not yet closed and the guy should not start rejoicing ahead of time. Zhang Xiao said that this was why they still had a chance to beat him and began to get up from his chair. He straightened up, straightened his tie and said in all seriousness that there was only one way for everyone present. He looked threateningly at his relatives and said that they needed to kill him in order to change the heir. Everyone listened to him attentively and when he said something like that, they became nervous. They felt uneasy, but everyone understood in their hearts that Zhang Xiao was completely right. Their emotions turned to anger when the man said that he did not know who would be worthy then. And Song Ji did not hesitate to show that she was angry at this attitude towards herself from Ken Shao. He looked back at everyone at the exit of the hall and told them that he would be waiting for anyone who wanted to try to do this. And with a calm and confident gait he began to walk away, leaving his relatives behind. Everyone silently followed him with their gazes in complete silence, and everyone was thinking about something different. When the man, who had not said a word before, suddenly hit the table with his fist and shouted about how arrogant Xiao was. The man was very angry that Zhang Xiao allowed himself to talk like that even though he was a nobody here. Two women appeared at the door to the large hall. One of them asked why they were needlessly angry. She smiled and said that since grandfather decided so, then there was a reason for it. Someone asked what Nan Thin meant, but she said she simply sided with her grandfather. Song Ji believed that Xiao was an arrogant stepchild who had also brought an incomprehensible girl and was still an honored guest. And the girl believed that if grandfather did not change his decision, then they needed to convince Xiao himself. Nan Thing watched their experiences and laughed quietly next to her daughter. And then she told her that all these people were just a crowd of fools and nothing more. And then Ning Thing told her daughter that all these people are just a crowd of fools and nothing more. The girl turned to her mother and noticed her smile. She asked what she was up to. And the woman said that all the heirs of the Jan family are very different. Some are greedy for money. Sun Ji is busy shopping, and Jan Xiao outshines them with his intelligence and manners. The second man is too greedy for women, on whom he spends huge sums. Therefore, choosing Xiao among all of them is a very wise decision on grandfather Can's part. The girl listened to her mother and said that in fact, it doesn't matter who gets the inheritance. Nan Thing smiled and agreed with her daughter that the heir is not that important. Because for the girl it was necessary to become the only important person in the eyes of this heir. And the girl was sure that Zhang Xiao could not resist her beauty, and although the guy has a child, he was not married. It was not clear what was between him and Lu Yi, but the girl saw that it was nothing serious. Although even if there were some feelings there, they did not matter, since no one could resist her. Zhang Xiao was supposed to be her expensive gift. The sounds of the game could be heard from the house. Yo-Yo found the robot and dinosaur toys and actively acted out their battle. Senior Mr. Zhang took pictures of the boy and played with him. Lu Yiye awkwardly stood nearby in the playroom and watched them have fun. The girl would never have thought that Grandpa Jan was really like this. She bowed to Mr. Jan and said that she would go and get them something to drink. Lu Yi walked towards the exit, watching how happily Yu Yu was spending time with her grandfather. She saw the boy smiling happily at the camera and thought that this was the first time she had seen him like this. When the girl left the room, she accidentally bumped into Zhang Zhao's chest. She raised her head and saw a man in front of her. Lu Yi remained silent in embarrassment. And then she looked away and said that she had not noticed the man and asked what he was doing here. Zhang Xiao placed his palm on the door and said that only Grandpa and Yu Yu usually enter this room. The couple watched as the grandfather happily played with the boy, pretending to be a dinosaur, while the boy hunted it. Zhang Xiao turned to Lu Yiye and addressed her, attracting the girl's attention. The man pulled her close and asked what she had done since her grandfather allowed her to enter. Lu Yi stood in the middle of their shared bedroom and asked in surprise why Yu Yu wouldn't sleep with her. The room was decorated in soothing colors, with gray predominant, and was quite spacious. Ken Shao closed the door behind him and said that these days, Yu Yu usually spends the night with his grandfather. Lu Yiye was very excited about this news and was worried about where she would sleep in this case. The man sat down on the double bed, which was strewn with rose petals, and asked what she thought. He brushed the blanket, drawing the girl's attention to all the petals and the place next to him. Lu Yiji watches this with his mouth wide open and remains dumbfounded. Zhang Xiao began to undress without waiting for an answer, and suggested that the girl go take a shower and go to bed. But Lu Yi still spoke out against it and reminded them that they were just pretending to be husband and wife. When the man heard about this, he froze, and his shirt remained only half unbuttoned. But in the end, the shirt was completely unbuttoned and opened, revealing Zhao's toned torso. Lu Yi saw someone else's body and felt her entire skin burning from embarrassment. Therefore, the girl decided not to sort things out further and just go to sleep on the sofa. Zhang Xiao did not argue with her and went to the shower to wash off the fatigue of today. When he finished, he walked out of the bathroom, leaving drops of water running down his legs. Zhang Xiao's hair was also wet, and the rest of his body was covered with drops of water. Lu Yi was carrying a mountain of bed linen at that moment and didn't see that the guy had already gotten out of the shower. Therefore, the girl did not even have a chance to avoid a collision with Zhang Xiao. The girl fell and all the bedding she was carrying began to fall on top of Lu Yi. Lu Yi covered her face in order to somehow escape from the things falling on her. When things stopped falling, she opened her eyes and saw an almost naked Zhang Xiao in front of her. And the girl didn't even know how to react to this. She began to remove her hand from her face. And she realized that although this type of man embarrassed her very much, at the same time she admired him. Zhang Xiao extended his hand to the girl to help, and she said that if she had seen enough, she could get up. Lu Yi seemed to come to her senses when the guy hinted to her that he saw perfectly well how she looked at him. Therefore, the girl was a little embarrassed and tried to pretend that she had not been looking at him at all. Zhang Xiao felt irritated when Lbe said that he had nothing to look at, so he grabbed the girl by the wrist and forcefully pulled her towards him. Lu Yi didn't expect anything like this from the guy, so she leaned forward very easily and screamed softly. Her cheek met directly with Qin Zhao's chest. This situation did not help her get rid of embarrassment. Lu Yi wanted to move away, but the guy did not let her do this and asked her not to twitch. Lu Yi was a little panicked, but tried to convince herself that Zhang Xiao would not be able to create animal desire in her. Lu Yi was a little panicked, but tried to convince herself that Zhang Xiao would not be able to create animal desire in her. Therefore, the girl closed her eyes and tried not to pay attention to their proximity and the rapid beating of her heart. Because her eyes were closed, she could only feel the guy leaning down next to her. When Lu Yi opened her eyes, she saw that Zhang Xiao was holding the edge of the blanket, which was tangled in her legs. After that, the guy smiled charmingly at the embarrassed girl and headed to his bed. Lu Yi lay on the sofa and thought that she accidentally tripped and pulled off the blanket. At first she thought she might fall, but then she remembered her kiss with Xiao. These thoughts made the girl feel embarrassed again, and she turned on her side to drive away unnecessary thoughts. And just when she was ready to go to bed, the doorbell rang. Lu Yi was wondering who decided to come to their bedroom so late, and the girl went to look through the peephole. There, she saw Senior Mr. Zhang standing right in front of their door. Lu Yi panicked and realized that she had to quickly run to bed and take the entire bed from the sofa. The girl grabbed the bed and ran to wake up Xiao. She shouted to him in a whisper that grandfather had come. Zhang Xiao got out of bed and went to open the door for his grandfather, not fully understanding why he came. The man walked past the puzzled Xiao into the room and asked if they were well accommodated. Senior Mr. Zhang walked to the bed and saw Lu Yi pretending to be asleep. Grandfather smiled when he saw Qin Xiao and his new wife sleeping in the same bed. Lu Yi was very nervous about this whole situation, but she diligently pretended to be asleep. Because Senior Mr. Zhang had already seen what interested him, he said he wouldn't bother them anymore. Lu Yi thought sadly that the man had already disturbed them, and now he was leaving as if nothing had happened. The girl sat down on the bed and said that, just in case, she would still have to sleep with him. Zhang Xiao laughed because the girl pretended that she didn't want this at all. But then Lu Yi said that she would sleep in his bed under one condition. She used several pillows and used them to divide the bed into two halves. Lu Yi called this place a border zone and threatened that anyone who violates it will die. Morning has come, the sun's rays fell beautifully on the leaves of the trees, and the birds sang beautifully. Lu Yi slept soundly and enjoyed this pleasant atmosphere around her. It seemed to her that she was hugging a pillow and calmly basking in bed, surrounded by birds. The girl began to wake up and opened her eyes with the thoughts that she slept wonderfully today. But the next second she realized with horror one very strange thing. This thing turned out to be that it was Lu Yi who violated their border zone. And all this time she was hugging not a pillow at all, but the naked torso of Zhang Xiao, which made the situation even more awkward. She sat up in bed and couldn't believe that she was the one who had trespassed while she was sleeping. She was very ashamed, and she decided to run away while the guy was sleeping and come up with an escape plan. However, Zhang Xiao was no longer asleep and got up behind her when she tried to crawl away to grab her. Lu Yi was pinned to the bed, and Zhang Xiao asked if she really wanted to escape so easily. The man added that she would have to pay for violating the contract and began to lean towards the girl. Confused, Lu Yi watched the guy's face approaching and wanted to stop him, but she didn't succeed, and Zhang Xiao gently kissed the girl, hovering over her. The guy held the girl's wrist as he received his payment for breaking their agreement. His other hand slid down his back, reaching Lu Yiji's lower back. Their kisses were suddenly interrupted by the sound of a phone ringing, and the couple moved away from each other. Zhang Xiao got out of bed and went to talk on the phone, leaving the girl on the bed. Lu Yi breathed a sigh of relief and said that the guy scared her to death. She touched her lips and almost thought that she was not at all against such kisses. But suddenly Zhao's condition changed, he became very gloomy and tense and the girl began to worry about him. Lu Yi was wondering who called the guy to make him change so much, and Xiao listened attentively to his interlocutor. The man said that Killer K was sent from there, who cut out an entire group and we need to be careful. Zhang Xiao listened to the request to be as careful as possible and said that he understood everything. Lu Yiji stood in the bathroom brushing her teeth, thinking about something not very important. When Zhang Xiao came in and pressed himself against her back as he reached for his toothbrush, the girl paused while brushing her teeth and asked them not to lean so close to her. And then she turned her gaze to the mirror and carefully began to examine their reflections. Zhang Xiao and the girl stood next to each other, and there were small clouds of foam at their mouths. Lu Yiye was very amused by this picture and couldn't help but giggle. After Can Xiao finished brushing his teeth, he leaned over to the girl and wished her good morning. One of the servants bowed to them and greeted Mr. Jan and the lady. Xiao and Lu Yi got dressed and decided to take a short walk in such good weather. As they passed by one of the arches, Lu Yi noticed two unfamiliar women. Nan Thing also noticed the couple and said that they had a very lucky meeting, and her daughter only said hello to the man. Zhang Xiao greeted the women and said that he and Lu Yi decided to take a short walk around the area. Nan Thing laughed and called the couple lovebirds, and Xiao confirmed it. Her daughter didn't like it, and she didn't even try to hide her irritation. Nan Thing took Lu Yi's hands and began to say that she was her big fan and asked to talk in private. The girl turned her gaze to Xiao and wanted to ask him, but he was already smiling at her and saying that she could go. Nan Thing took the girl by the hand and began to lead her away, telling her how she liked Lu Ye's performance in one of the films. Her daughter looked at her mother, watching as she led her main competitor further and further away. The girl again began to smile sweetly at the man and said that they had not seen him for a long time. She had a plan to conquer Xiao, so she invited him to go for a walk in the garden. The girl again began to smile sweetly at the man and offered to go for a walk in the garden. Nan Thing said that she actually wanted to talk about how much she knows about Xiao and talk a little about him. The woman said that he had been lonely since childhood, and he did not care about others, and those around him were afraid of him. Lu Yi smiled tensely, but she thought that she knew his difficult character very well. Nan Thing continued to say that as a child, Xiao was only close to her daughter and everyone said that they would get married. Lu Yi nodded and tried to understand why the woman started this whole unpleasant conversation with her. Nan Thing watched with pleasure how her words affected poor Lu Yiji. And then she asked not to take her words seriously. Lu Yi realized that the woman's true intention was to separate them. Nan Thing approached her and began to say that according to family traditions, Lu Yiye could not be his only girlfriend. The woman said that there was no need to worry so much and added that Zhang Xiao could not do this to her. But Nan Thing did not have time to finish, because Lu Yi gently made it clear that this was their business and it did not concern her. The woman was so surprised that she even opened her mouth. She didn't think the girl would fight back. The girl asked Xiao if he remembered how they played as children, but the man was not in the mood to talk and left. The girl was angry because Zhang Xiao didn't look at her at all and didn't start a conversation. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that her mother and Lu Yi were already returning and came up with a new plan. The girl screamed loudly, and Zhang Xiao turned to see what happened to her. The girl sat on the floor and pitifully called Xiao. The man asked if she was okay and extended his hand to her. She happily accepted help from Can Xiao and held his palm tightly. And then she pretended to trip and fall right on the man's chest. She said that she had sprained her leg and asked the man to carry her to the room, if it was not difficult for him. Lu Yi and Nan Thing walked in silence when the girl began to think that it would be nice to find Can Xiao. And then she turned her head and saw him right in front of her with a girl in his arms. They looked at each other in surprise. Lu Yi became gloomy, and Nan Thing pretended to be worried about her daughter and asked what happened. The girl said that she sprained her leg and now Xiao is carrying her to the bedroom, if Lu Yi doesn't mind. The woman began to remember how restless they used to be, and Lu Yi was angry that they decided to play with her. Lu Yai covered her mouth and said that this was terribly careless and offered to examine her leg. The girl began to quickly walk towards the puzzled girl and the surprised Jan Xiao. Lu Yai took the girl's leg when she panicked and asked what she was up to. Ieg looked scary and said that she could easily set the bone back since the girl had dislocated it. The girl in Zhao's arms panicked even more and started screaming for the girl not to do this. But Lu Yai didn't listen to her and properly pulled the girl's ankle, and she screamed loudly. Yi Ji winked at the girl and suggested checking if she could walk now. Zhang Xiao began to lower the surprised girl to the ground, and she felt that now she was really in pain. The man started to leave and the girl tried to stop him and said that her leg still hurt. But Lu Yi intercepted someone else's hand, preventing him from touching Jan Xiao, and she said that if it didn't help, then she could try again, but the girl quickly refused. After that, the girl walked up to Xiao, stroked his chest and called the man by name, and then she grabbed him tightly by the tie, turned to the girls and said that they were going home. Although at first Zhang Xiao was confused by such pressure from Lu Yi, he was glad to leave the dumbfounded women behind. Neither mother nor daughter could believe what the girl had just allowed herself to do. The girl remarked that she had never seen anyone who dared to behave like this with Zhang Xiao before. But the woman got angry and started screaming that she couldn't talk like that when that slut stood up to her. Nan Thing said that the girl was useless and that she would give her one more try to get Xiao into bed. Yuan Ti received a call from Aunt Thing and asked to hire Ying Ying as her uncle's secretary. She said that she had just graduated and needed somewhere to practice, and the guy was old enough to help. Yuan Ti listened to Aunt Nan Thing's request and, after thinking a little, agreed to fulfill it. The guy hung up and already imagined what a fun performance awaited him soon. Lu Yai continued to lead the man along, using her tie as a leash. Then she let him go and sarcastically asked for forgiveness for preventing the man from fulfilling his heroic duty. Lu Yi turned to Xiao and said that she was not jealous, but simply did not want to watch the cheap performance. Zhang Xiao was right next to her and put his hand on the girl's waist, pulling her towards him. Lu Yi wanted to say something, but the guy whispered in her ear to not move because someone was walking. They stood close to each other and watched as a man and a little girl walked past them. Zhang Xiao praised the girl and said that he expected the same performance from her at the evening reception. The evening was approaching and the evening reception of the Zhang Xiao family was soon to come. Lu Yiji walked out wearing sparkling shoes, her heels clicked on the floor, drawing attention to her. She came out to Xiao and asked how he liked this dress for tonight. The girl was wearing a beautiful blue dress, in which she seemed to shine all over, but the neckline was very deep. And Zhang Xiao said that this dress is not suitable. Lu Yai was very surprised when she heard this answer. The guy said that it was too revealing and asked Lu Yi to change into another dress. Lu Yai was upset, plus this dress was very difficult to take off. She changed into a more closed white dress, it was very delicate, and she asked if this would do. Zhang Xiao liked this and the girl said that he had very old-fashioned tastes in clothes. At the reception there were a huge number of tables and everything around seemed to sparkle, there weren't very many people yet. Zhang Xiao and Lu Yai were met by a group of girls who immediately began to say how irresistible he was. Lu Yi heard someone insult Xiao in a whisper for deceiving her grandfather and receiving an undeserved inheritance. The voice said that the guy had nothing to be proud of and that Xiao would not last long here. The girl turned around and tried to figure out who it was. And suddenly she heard that voice again, only much louder, and now he said that he had not seen his nephew for a long time. Lu Yi turned around and saw a man who was walking toward Zhang Xiao to hug him and was quickly approaching them. Lu Yi turned around and saw a man who was walking toward Zhang Xiao to hug him and was quickly approaching them. Zhang Xiao took a step back and was able to avoid being hugged by the unpleasant man who had just recently insulted him. The man felt awkward, and Lu Yi thought that it served him right for saying bad things about Xiao. Uncle Sai turned to the girl and began to say that she would be able to bear him many healthy children. Ken Xiao asked not to worry about it and said that one Yu was enough for them. His wife appeared next to the man and said that such a young girl should give birth to many heirs for Xiao. In case something irreparable happens to Yao Yao, there must still be an heir. Lu Yi didn't like that these people allowed themselves to behave like this and say such things to them. She pretended to think and said that Zhang Xiao is young and strong for such conversations, only if someone is not going to kill him. Uncle Si and his wife did not expect to hear such accusations directly to their faces, especially from Lu Yi. The man pointed at the girl and started shouting that such a slut shouldn't talk to him like that. Zhang Xiao covered Lu Ye with himself and asked his uncle to watch his language, since his wife was also a member of the family. He pressed the girl to him and said that everything that he could call his own here, she could also safely consider hers. This phrase was heard not only by Uncle Sai, but also by a whole crowd of other people, and they were all surprised. Lu Yiji became nervous and decided that Zhang Xiao was too convincing in the role. Uncle Sai called on the phone and ordered the plan to be carried out much earlier, since he could no longer restrain himself. There were a huge number of people at the party and they were all having fun, but Lu Yi thought that all these hypocrites were unlikely to really be happy with Zhang Xiao. The girl looked at Qin Shao next to her and couldn't take her eyes off him. Now she understood why Qin Shao always looked so lonely. This was not surprising, given such an environment. The man felt someone else's gaze on him and turned around to look, and he noticed that Lu Yi was looking at him. The girl tried to pretend that she just glanced at him by chance and began to drink wine. And then she asked Xiao, absolutely seriously, to be careful with that Uncle Si. Zhang Xiao leaned over to the embarrassed girl and asked if she was worried about him, and she said not yet. The man calmed her down and admitted that he had already introduced his man into his circle. Zhang Xiao took the girl's hand and said that he would take her to a place where they could relax. Lu Yi walked in a short robe and said that she knew that he would be alone, because the Jan family is very greedy. The girl called Xiao, and she began to watch the water splashing. Suddenly she saw a man who was wearing only swimming trunks and was heading towards her. Zhang Xiao walked up to her, and the girl just watched him and couldn't say a word. The guy took Lu Yi to the hot spring and asked the girl to be careful. He approached the girl and said that she had done a good job. Lu Yi said it was nothing special, and she felt that she couldn't be around Xiao without feeling embarrassed, so she started to walk away. She lied that it was hard to breathe here and said that she would go to the other side for a while. Lu Yi walked away and leaned on the side, enjoying the way her body relaxed in the hot water. The girl herself did not notice how she fell asleep and spent a whole half hour in this position. She was awakened by the splash of water very close to her, and she opened her eyes a little, not understanding what was happening. She saw a worried Qin Shao asking how she was feeling. Lu Yi said that she was fine and just accidentally fell asleep, and she began to fall straight into the water. Zhang Xiao carried her out of the water in his arms and shouted for the girl to wake up immediately. Lu Yi stretched out her hand to his face and said that she was fine and the guy didn't need to be so emotional. Zhang Xiao hugged the girl to him and carried her away from the hot springs. When the girl realized that she was being carried in her arms, she quickly got down, grabbed her robe and ran away. Zhang Xiao wanted to call the doctor, but Lu Yi said that she needed to breathe and everything would pass. When the girl was able to go outside, it was already a month in the sky, and the sky was densely dotted with stars. Lu Yi changed into her clothes and went out for a walk, and I noticed how beautiful the night was. She sat on a bench in the garden and admired the stars. She realized that she had not seen them for a very long time. Suddenly the girl felt someone's tongue tickling her leg and thought it was a cat. But when Lu Yi looked down, she was horrified to see that same tiger lying right in front of her. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, a loud female scream was heard. It came from deep within the territory. Zhang Xiao was finishing changing clothes when he heard a scream and recognized it as Lu Yi's voice. Suddenly he realized that a tiger usually walked in the western part of the park and was very scared. Zhang Xiao put on his jacket and ordered to immediately look for his wife and save her at any cost. The guy ran, thinking about the wild tiger, from which almost no one could escape alive. He hoped that this was not why Lu Yi was screaming. Zhang Xiao did not stop for a second and began shouting the girl's name in an attempt to find her. But what he saw when he finally found it shocked Xiao to the very core. Lu Yi sat next to the tiger and stroked him on the top of his head, telling him how obedient little Jan was. The guards who accompanied Mr. Ken in the search were also shocked when they saw this. Lu Yi noticed that someone had come and was standing behind her and turned around to see who it was. Xiao was there and the girl told him how cute and fluffy baby Zan is. The guy asked why she called him that. And Lu Yi thought that because he also looked fierce and was also unsociable, he was a little Zhang Xiao. Xiao glared at the tiger and the girl thought that it was strange for a tiger to be afraid of people, but the Jan family were not entirely ordinary people. The man sat down next to Lu Yi and said that in all these years, only he managed to make friends with the tiger. He asked how the girl did it, and Lu Yi said that she masters the rare art of cat caressing. The guy took off his jacket and threw it over Lu Ye's shoulders, explaining that it was cold outside. The tiger, which lay at their feet, watched the actions of the people with interest. The girl again became very embarrassed and began to leave. She said it was too cold and it was time to go home. The next sunny day arrived, and everything around was playing with bright colors. The servants who were caring for the flowers in the garden could not believe their eyes and opened their mouths in surprise. Lu Yi was walking along the path not far from them, leading a calm and happy tiger on a leash. Everyone was shocked that the tiger approached the main house, especially on a leash. No one expected this from Lu Yi. The girl entered the main hall, and the elder Mr. Jiang expressed his admiration for her. He said that he heard that she tamed a tiger and also taught him commands. Yo-Yo, who was sitting in his grandfather's arms, pointed to his mother and said that dad was listening to her too. Lu Yi felt awkward and asked the boy not to say such nonsense. Grandfather said that he could now retire peacefully when Xiao was in such good hands. The grandfather said that he hoped that she could be relied on and handed the girl an envelope with money. Zhang Zhao's family headed to the helicopter and were asked to return and take care of each other. So they boarded the helicopter and began their long-awaited trip back home. Lu Yi and Yu Yu were very tired, so they fell asleep as soon as their helicopter took off into the sky. And Zhang Xiao carefully put his arm around the girl's shoulders so as not to wake her up and watched her with a smile. The girl woke up because her phone started ringing and, sleepily, began looking for it. When Lu Yi took out her phone, the screen said that Xiao Bai was calling her. Zhang Xiao became wary when he saw who was calling the girl, and Lu Yi was very surprised. The girl answered the call and promised to meet the guy this evening. From the phone ringing and movement next to him, Yao Yao also woke up and called his mother. Lu Yi said that she needed to have dinner with an old friend today and asked the boy to behave well at home. Yu Yu agreed, and Lu Yi asked Zhang Xiao for the evening off, but he refused. The girl got angry and reminded her that she worked for them and she needed days off and they couldn't just exploit her. But the screams had no effect, so Lu Yi turned to her pleading gaze. Zhang Xiao tried to resist her charms, but realized that he had lost this battle. Therefore, he allowed the girl to leave for one evening. Lu Yi was glad that her cute pretense always worked. While they flew home and when the girl was freed, the moon and stars were already shining in the sky. She went to meet Xiao Bai, who was standing at the entrance to the restaurant, and the girls nearby discussed his attractiveness. Lu Yi thought that Xiao Bai had always been popular, but now he didn't look like his old self. However, when the guy saw the girl, a wide smile appeared on his face and he greeted her. Lu Yi waved back at him and decided that she just imagined that in front of her was the same cute Xiao Bai. The waiter brought a menu to their table and said that the guy had not visited them with his girlfriend for a long time. Lu Yi wanted to correct him, but Xiao Bai replied that from now on they will come here more often. The girl did not understand why her friend deceived the man, and said that he should not have done it. Xiao Bai said that besides Lu Yi, he has no one to bring here. Lu Yi said that the guy is a fool and, as always, says nonsense to make her angry. Xiao Bai began to mock the girl and said that little Yi Ji was too cute when she was angry. Xiao Bai noticed a few pieces of rice at the corner of the girl's mouth and asked her not to move. And then he showed the rice to the girl and said that she had some rice left there. Lu Yi was embarrassed by this. Xiao Bai asked about strengthening the security of the Jan family and whether she had a bodyguard, and the girl said that there is. But Zhang Xiao doesn't have much contact with outsiders. Bai said that he looks like a man who carries a gun. The girl was surprised and said that this was nonsense, because the man was not the head of the mafia. Lu Yi said that he may look angry and menacing, but he is actually an ordinary person. The guy said he wasn't worried then, and they clinked glasses for a speedy return to the movies. Suddenly, the phone in Lu Yi's bitch rang, and she had to take her mind off the conversation. She asked the guy to wait while she answered the call and saw that Yo-Yo was calling her. She picked up the phone and immediately heard the boy say that he felt bad. She began to worry and asked what hurt. After which she quickly jumped up and promised the child that she would come as soon as possible. Lu Yi apologized and said that she had to go. Xiao Bai was upset that they didn't sit properly again. And the girl bowed and promised that next time they would sit normally, and now she invites him. Xiao Bai smiled softly at Lu Yi and said that he remembered her words and would wait. They were leaving the cafe, and Xiao Bai offered to give the girl a ride, but she refused. They couldn't continue the argument because Qian Xiao was sitting in the car right in front of them. The man looked at the surprised Lu Yai and told her to get into the car and they would go home. She looked at Zhang Xiao and asked why he came for her, but no one answered her. Because Xiao Bai and Qin Xiao met their gazes and began to express dissatisfaction with each other's gazes. Xiao Bai was the first to retreat. He smiled sweetly at the man and said that he would then return the girl to him. Zhang Xiao chuckled displeasedly and looked away from the guy. He waited for Lu Yai to get into the car to leave. But she didn't do this for a long time, so Qin Xiao asked why she was still standing around. Lu Yiye looked at the man a little confused because she herself did not know the answer to this question. Xiao Bai waved after them and asked them not to exceed the speed limit and drive very carefully. And after their car had driven a sufficient distance, he took out and inserted the earphone. Xiao Bai planted a wiretap in Lu Yiji's bag when they left the restaurant together. And now a small device that was in her purse helped the guy hear what they were talking about. Xiao Bai looked ahead tensely and thought that his target was Qin Xiao. When they arrived home, they immediately went to take Yo-Yo's temperature. She was slightly elevated. Lu Yai hugged the boy and told him that he scared her very much, and the boy said that he missed his mother. The girl pulled the child away from her and asked what he called her. Yo-Yo again happily called the girl mom. Lu Yai felt very guilty when she told the boy that she was not really his mother. Yo-Yo looked into her eyes with disappointment and called her mom again, but with a question and sadness in his voice. The girl immediately gave in and allowed the boy to call himself whatever he wanted. Lu Yai hugged Yu. The boy gave his dad a thumbs up and received the same gesture in return. Yuan Ti, who was watching this, thought that their innocent Yao had just fooled his mother around his little finger. A strange squeak could be heard in the living room of the house, which spoke of danger in the house. The man had a special device in his hands, which beeped loudly near Lu Yi's purse. Zhang Xiao climbed in and saw a micro wiretap in her. This was expected, but still unpleasant. The man broke the device in his fist and realized that they were indeed being held at gunpoint. Qin Xiao called someone immediately after he found the wiretap, and he said that the killer had finally given himself away. Dim rays of moonlight made their way through the window in the bedroom, illuminating the room a little. Yu was asleep in his bed, and Lu Yi fell asleep on the floor while she sat next to him. Next to the girl was her phone, which suddenly rang in the middle of the night. Lu Yai picked up the phone and heard about the audition for the leading role in the country's Heavenly Beauty. The girl enthusiastically told Lu Yi that this was a hot project about palace intrigue. Lu Yai smiled awkwardly and admitted that she was not very interested in palace intrigues right now. But the girl said that Ling Shui was also going to take part in these auditions. And Lu Yi immediately changed her mind and agreed to participate in this casting. It turned out that the producers of the project were the Jiang family, so Lu Yi had the main role in his pocket. She realized that Zhang Xiao took her seriously, and she was very curious why he needed this. The girl went to Zhao's room and knocked, asking if he was sleeping. The man allowed her to enter. Zhang Xiao sat in a chair near the window and dangled a glass of wine in his hand. Lu Yi saw this kind of Zhang Xiao and for some reason was very surprised because of this picture. The girl felt as if this situation was familiar to her, as if she had already seen something like this before. Zhang Xiao worriedly stood up from his seat and began to walk towards the girl. He asked what was wrong with her. But in Lu Yi's memory, the guy looked like he was a completely different person, and it was strange. And then the girl could not understand where such images with Zhao's participation even appeared in her head. She had a terrible headache and Lu Yi screamed and grabbed her. Zhang Xiao ran to the girl. And Lu Yi continued to see images in her head involving Zhang Xiao, although she had never seen it before. She remembered Qin Zhao's beautiful, sincere smile and wondered if it really belonged to the guy. Lu Yiji always felt like she forgot something, and it was something very important. These memories were associated with the year when she studied at the Beijing Film Academy. Then Jiang Wensheng courted her, but she did not particularly reciprocate his feelings. But Ling Shui, on the contrary, constantly talked about him, but Lu Yi believed that he was not the person she wanted to be around. Later, on the eve of graduation, Lu Yi's group went on a short trip to the mountains. And then, while climbing the mountain, something happened to Lu Yiji. The girl fell off a cliff. Then she hit her head hard, and Jiang Wen Shzhen found her, took her down to the foot of the mountain and took her to the hospital. After that incident, Wen Xing constantly came to the hospital and then Lu Yi began to have constant headaches. But she soon recovered and entered the showbiz circle and began to quickly develop her career, receiving an award. when SHZHN helped the girl manage her business, and she gave the guy a small stake in gratitude. But then she left the film industry, hoping to get married, when Sheng provided for her, and then it turned out that he cheated on her. But right now, Lu Yiji doesn't think that any of her memories were not entirely correct. She had always been passionate about her career and loved her work since when Sheng convinced her to leave. In the past, whenever Lu Yiye was busy with work, when Sheng would bring her coffee, Lu Yiye was tormented by the question of how she could not notice the connection between Ling Shui and Wen Shen before. All previous years the girl was naive, stupid and simple-minded. Suddenly she remembered her medications. Everything that was going on in Lu Yiji's head was so confusing, she wanted to understand what she was missing. But why did she see in her memories a different person, but at the same time, very similar to Xiao? In that memory, she also had a severe headache, and the glass fell out of her hand. But then Zhang Xiao was very worried about her condition, and she saw his frightened expression. Now, as she sits on the floor and suffers from a headache, she sees the man's even more worried face in front of her. Lu Yai could not cope with the headache and fainted. Zhang Xiao tried to wake her up, but the girl had already lost consciousness, and it was useless. Therefore, Zhang Xiao fell silent and thought about his next steps. He carefully lifted the girl from the floor and picked her up, and then carried Lu Yiye towards the bed. He laid the girl down and stroked her hair. The man was very worried about Lu Yai. Zhang Xiao walked to one of his shelves and reached for the jars that were on the top shelf. This jar contained a soothing essential oil that helps treat memory disorders. Zhang Xiao unscrewed the cap and dripped some into the aroma diffuser. He promised that soon the girl would remember everything. The aroma of baking oil began to spread throughout the room and the man promised that he would protect Lu Yiye. Zhang Xiao kissed the girl on the forehead and told her that she would remember everything and come back very soon. Ling Shui performed at the casting for the country's Heavenly Beauty and at the end of her performance she bowed to the judges. The girl thought that the author of the script was Wen Sheng's friend and she could ask him for help. She mentally told the other girls that they had come in vain and mocked them. Suddenly, all her joy dissipated when Lu Yiye appeared behind her and called out to her. All the girls who came to the casting also heard Lu Yiye's voice and could not believe their eyes. Lu Yiji smiled kindly and greeted everyone. She looked great. Ling Shui was annoyed and surprised. She asked why Lu Yai came to today's casting. And then she started telling her sister that since she had just returned, she shouldn't take on such serious projects. There were a lot of Lu Yai's fans on the set and she greeted everyone. And the evil Ling Shui replied that she must try, if she does not want everyone to bypass her and destroy her reputation. Ling Shui forced herself to calm down and wish her sister good luck, and she reassured herself that she knew the screenwriter. Lu Yai thanked her and said that she actually came here just for show. Ling Shui did not understand what she meant. And then Lu Yi loomed over the girl and asked if she had watched what kind of company was making this film. Ling Shui didn't look, but now she had suspicions, and she quickly took out her phone to look. Her main fears were confirmed by the first article, in which she saw that the film was being produced by Star Entertainment. Ling Shui immediately became gloomy and felt her body stiffen a little from shock and despair. And then she heard Lu Yiye behind her say that she had recently made an agreement with someone, and he wants this issue to be resolved in a fair manner, and not because of some ulterior motives. Ling Shui turned to her sister, who was telling her that the film would only be good with the right actresses. And then Lu Yi approached her sister and said that she would not do anything against her because she had a conscience. To others, the scene between the sisters looked very cute, and they discussed how close they were. At that moment, Ling Shui was simply seething with anger, and Lu Yi said that she could take the useless idiot for herself. The girl said that she did not need him, but Ling Shui should know that soon he would have nothing left. Lu Yai said that she didn't know if she would need him then, but they had true love, so Lu Yai promised to wait for them. Just at this moment, a man came out of the room and called Lu Yai to audition. Lu Yai put her hand on her sister's shoulder and wished her luck in her show, and smiled softly at her. And then she turned around and headed into the listening room, leaving her angry sister behind. Ling Shui felt humiliated and mentally promised herself that she would definitely deal with her half-sister. Lu Yai played her role as if she already had the right costume and the right scenery around her. And although in fact the girl was standing in the middle of an empty room in an ordinary white dress, no one saw it. The jury was delighted with such acting and could not wait for her appearance in the film. Lu Yai shook everyone's hands, accepting the praise, and said that she was looking forward to their productive cooperation. And although at first Lu Yai just wanted to rub Ling Xue's nose in the face, but after that she wanted the role herself, the script was just great. The plot of The Heavenly Beauty of the Country is as exciting as love itself. He tells a love story. The story of a girl and a guy who loved each other but lost their memories. And for some inexplicable reason, the plot seemed very close and painfully familiar to Lu Yi. Two men were hiding behind the container, they had pistols in their hands and they were nervous because they did not see the policeman. Suddenly, the silhouette of a man appears behind the criminals, and you can see him jumping off the container. This is the policeman. He lands on the floor not far from the criminals and reaches for his gun. And immediately, with a couple of light and quick movements, he shoots at the men in front of him. The criminals scream, but do not have time to do anything, and they fall lifelessly to the floor from their wounds. The policeman can now allow himself to relax and casts a confident glance at one of the cameras. People on the set are simply delighted with this scene and everyone begins to praise the guy's performance. Xiao Bai is praised and said that despite his long break, he is still at the top and has no equal. Girls crowded around the guy, someone fixed his makeup, and someone offered him water. Xiao Bai asked for his phone number, smiled charmingly and took a photo. And he sent the photo to Lu Yiye so that she could appreciate his image. The girl answered immediately, and she wrote that he looks amazing. Just at this moment, on the set of UNT, he praised Xiao Bai's mannerisms and movements and said that he was a true professional. Everyone present looked at UNT, the girls did not immediately understand who was in front of them, and the guy was not very happy with him. Then someone from the team shouted that this guy was Mr. Kan's grandson, and everyone began to look at UNT. Every member of the team was very happy to see a person like John UNT, and they were wondering what he was doing here. The guy smiled confidently and greeted the entire film crew at once, moving closer to Xiao Bai. They shook hands and UNT said that he had lunch with one of the directors. He got free early and decided to stop by. The girls were very happy that they were able to see Mr. Jan's grandson, and one of the girls decided that the guy had come for her husband. But the girl next to her believed that it would be her husband who would be offered to appear in films. The guys moved away from other people and UNT noticed that the guy knew him. Xiao Yui said that he knows everyone around Yi. UNT looked at the guy and said that he was even braver than he seemed if he dared to court his aunt. Xiao Bai said that they are just childhood friends, but Ken Xiao has already shown himself in a bad light many times. UNT reminded the guy that the Jan family was strong enough to prevent the guy from rising to the top again. But Yu Bai said that he knows, but he also knows that his uncle will not do such things, and UNTI's threats are useless. The guy asked Jan UNT to leave empty talk and move on and say why he came. UNT said that his uncle asked him to give him something, and he took out a bag containing a broken listening device. Xiao Bai looked at it carefully, and then smiled and pretended that he didn't even know what this thing was. But UNT said that he himself knows. Xiao Bai wanted to touch the bag and said that it looked like a small earphone. UNT grabbed someone else's hand and tightly held Yu Bai's wrist in his hand. He wasn't happy with the guy pretending. UNT carefully examined the guy in front of him, continuing to hold his hand. Xiao Bai remained calm even in such a situation and continued to pretend that he did not understand anything at all. Then UNT let go of the other person's hand and told the guy that then there was nothing wrong and most likely he just pulled out the wrong thing. But immediately after these words, UNT pointed a gun at the head of the guy opposite. Xiao Bai remained calm, and he asked if Mr. Zhang Xiao was really so jealous that he was ready to commit murder because of this. UNT did not respond to this and took out his phone, where there was already a video call with Ken Xiao. The man said that the guy behaves as if he doesn't know anything, but refuses to act in any way. The guy was given away by his indifferent composure. Afterwards, Xiao told the guy that this is his last warning, he must leave Yi, otherwise he will have no mercy. Xiao Bai replied that Ken Xiao was abusing his position and suggested seeing who Lu Yailzi would choose on his own. Xiao Bai was sure that the man would not be able to compete with him, but Ken Xiao said that the girl had already chosen him. This made the guy freeze, and the man said that Yo is their common biological son. Yuan Tai lit a cigarette with a lighter gun, after which he gave it to the guy, said that it was a gift and began to leave, and Xiao Bai couldn't believe that Lu Yi gave birth to Jan Zhao's child. Yuan Ti was already in the car when he asked his uncle why he told that guy everything when even his aunt didn't know about it. Ken Xiao said that he wanted to see what Xiao Bai could find out with this information. Yuan Ti was slightly surprised by this. And Zhang Xiao explained that this whole matter is very complicated and the Xiao Bai family also took part in everything. And the man believed that if Xiao Bai began to understand him, he might find out something that even he did not yet know.